My wife staged a breakup to entertain her rich friends at a party, while her friends were watching. I didn't argue. I said, "Done. Enjoy your freedom." Their laughter died instantly. So there I was, standing in our overpriced downtown loft on a Friday night, holding a box of imported wine glasses that probably cost more than my college textbooks, wondering how the hell my life had turned into an unpaid internship for my wife's social climbing career. Camilla was buzzing around like a caffeinated hummingbird in Louboutins, barking orders at me like I was some kind of party-planning pack mule. "Daniel, those chairs go by the window, not the wall. Are you even listening to me?" "Yeah, babe, I'm listening." I'm also contemplating whether jumping out said window would be less painful than enduring another one of Tiffany's birthday extravaganzas. But sure, let's focus on chair placement. For those of you keeping score at home, this wasn't just any birthday party. Oh no, this was Tiffany's 30th birthday bash, and in Camilla's world, that meant it had to be more extra than a Kardashian wedding. We're talking champagne towers, a cheese board that could feed a small European country, and a guest list full of people who wore their net worth like a personality trait. These were the kinds of folks who said things like summer as a verb and thought brunch was a legitimate meal category that required its own dress code. I'd been to 3 of these shindigs in the past year alone, and each time I felt like I was attending a convention for people who peaked in their trust fund years. The thing about being married to Camilla is that you don't just marry the woman, you marry her entire social ecosystem. Her friends weren't just friends. They were like a corporation, complete with hierarchy, performance reviews, and apparently, a shared delusion that they were all starring in their own reality show. Tiffany was the CEO of this little operation, a trust fund baby who'd never worked a real job, but somehow always had opinions about hustling and grinding. Brooke was the CFO, managing everyone's drama like it was a diversified portfolio. And Chantel? She was the CMO, making sure every brunch, every shopping trip, and every Instagram story was perfectly curated for maximum engagement. As for me, I was basically the janitor, there to clean up messes, move furniture, and stay out of the way when the real players were talking business. "Daniel." Camilla's voice cut through my internal monologue like a knife through butter. "Can you please focus? We have less than 2 hours before people arrive, and you're just standing there like a mannequin at a clearance sale." I wanted to tell her that mannequins at clearance sales actually had more dignity than I did at that moment, but I bit my tongue. Marriage, I'd learned, was less about communication and more about strategic silence. "Pick your battles," my dad always said. "Save your energy for the wars that matter." So I smiled, nodded, and went back to arranging stemware like my life depended on it. About 45 minutes into this decorating hell, Camilla appeared in front of me with that look on her face. You know the one. The look that says, "I'm about to critique you, but I'm going to frame it as helpful advice so you can't get mad." She circled me like a shark evaluating its next meal, her perfectly manicured fingers reaching out to adjust my collar. "Honey," she said in that sugar-sweet voice that made my teeth hurt, "maybe you should change your shirt. That one is a little casual." This was the 5th time she'd commented on my outfit. The 5th time. I was wearing a button-down shirt and slacks. We were setting up for a party, not attending a state dinner. But in Camilla's world, appearances weren't just important, they were currency. And apparently, I was running a deficit. "What's wrong with this shirt?" I asked, genuinely curious about what fashion crime I'd committed this time. She tilted her head, doing that thing where she pretended to think really hard about how to phrase her criticism without sounding like a total nightmare. "It's just, well, you know Tiffany's friends are going to be here, and some of them are very successful people, and I just want us to look like we belong, you know?" Ah yes, the classic, "we need to look like we belong" speech. Translation: "You're embarrassing me, and I need you to pretend to be someone you're not so my friends don't realize I'm married down." I'd heard this speech so many times I could recite it backwards in 3 languages. I looked at her, this woman I'd married 3 years ago, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and didn't care that I drove a used Honda instead of a BMW. Somewhere along the way, she'd transformed into this person who measured her worth by the number of designer labels in her closet and the square footage of her friends' vacation homes. It was like watching someone slowly get brainwashed by a cult, except the cult wore Chanel and drank overpriced green juice. "Don't worry, honey," I said, flashing her my best customer service smile. "I left my circus act at home." She laughed, but it was that polite laugh people do when they're not sure if you're joking or being passive-aggressive. Spoiler alert, it was definitely the latter. The irony of the whole situation wasn't lost on me. Here I was, being told not to embarrass her, when I was the one with an actual job that required showing up before noon. I worked in project management for a tech company, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and didn't require me to post motivational quotes on LinkedIn every 5 minutes. Camilla, on the other hand, had what she called a lifestyle brand, which as far as I could tell meant she took pictures of her avocado toast and occasionally got free products from companies desperate for influencer exposure. But sure, I was the one who needed to step up his game. As the evening approached and the first guests started arriving, I found myself playing the role I'd perfected over the past year, the agreeable husband. I shook hands with men who talked about their stock portfolios like they were discussing military strategies. I nodded along while women explained their complicated skincare routines that required products with names I couldn't pronounce. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny and pretended to care about vacation stories from places I'd never be able to afford. This was my life now, and somewhere deep down, I knew something had to give. But standing there, watching Camilla float through the crowd like she was born for this shallow existence, I had no idea that the something that was about to give would be my entire marriage. I had no idea that in a few short hours, she would decide to turn our relationship into entertainment for her bougie friends. I had no idea that this night, this ridiculous Friday night party, would be the beginning of the end. All I knew was that my feet hurt, my fake smile was getting harder to maintain, and I desperately needed a drink that wasn't from the guest-only wine selection. Little did I know, Camilla was about to perform her own circus act, and I had a front-row seat to the greatest show of disrespect I'd ever witnessed. But hey, at least my shirt looked good. You know that moment when you accidentally stumble into information that fundamentally changes your entire perception of reality? Yeah, I was about to have one of those. I'd been tasked with bringing extra wine glasses from the storage closet to the kitchen, because apparently, Tiffany's 30 guests each needed approximately 4 different glass types for their various alcoholic preferences. God forbid someone had to drink Pinot Grigio from the same glass they used for Sauvignon Blanc. The horror. The absolute travesty. Someone call the Geneva Convention. I was walking down the hallway, arms full of stemware that cost more than my car payment, when I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but that specific brand of girlish giggling that women do when they're being absolutely diabolical and think no one's listening. It was coming from the guest room, the one we'd converted into what Camilla called her glam room, which was really just a glorified closet with good lighting and enough makeup to paint a small army. The door was cracked open just enough for sound to escape, and like an idiot, I stopped walking. I should have kept going. I should have minded my own business. But curiosity, as they say, is a total bastard. Okay, so everyone knows the plan, right? That was Camilla's voice, pitched higher than usual with excitement. She sounded like a sorority girl planning rush week, which, knowing her friends, wasn't too far off from their actual mental age. I stood there, frozen like a deer in headlights, holding these stupid glasses and trying to process what the hell I was hearing. The plan? What plan? Were they planning a surprise for Tiffany? A flash mob? Please God, not a flash mob. I couldn't handle watching rich people attempt choreography. Oh my God, yes. Brooke squealed, and I could practically hear her clapping her hands together like a trained seal. This is going to be absolutely iconic. Like, people are going to talk about this for months. Brooke had a tendency to describe everything as iconic, from her morning smoothies to the way her dog sat. The word had lost all meaning in her vocabulary, but she wielded it with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. She was the type of person who thought being rich was a personality trait, and that having an opinion on Rose qualified as being cultured. Then came Chantel's voice, smooth and calculating like a lawyer closing a deal. So let me get this straight. You're going to wait until everyone's watching, drop the bomb, and then we all act shocked and supportive. There was a pause, and I could hear the rustle of fabric, probably someone adjusting their designer outfit in the mirror. And Daniel has absolutely no idea? My blood pressure spiked so fast I almost dropped the glasses. Daniel has no idea about what? Why was my name being used in a sentence that involved bombs and acting? This was starting to sound less like party planning and more like a goddamn heist movie. Not a clue, Camilla said. and I could hear the smile in her voice. That particular smile that she used when she was being clever, or at least when she thought she was being clever. He's been so busy playing servant all night, he hasn't noticed anything. It's actually kind of perfect. The way she said servant made my stomach turn. Not even trying to hide the contempt, not even bothering to pretend I was her partner in this circus. Just straight up admitting that she saw me as the help. Cool, cool, cool. Nothing says healthy marriage like dehumanizing your spouse to your friends for entertainment purposes. Tiffany's voice chimed in, breathy and excited like she'd just discovered a new brunch spot. Okay, but what exactly are you going to say? We need to make sure the delivery is perfect. Like, award-worthy. Award-worthy? What in the actual hell was happening? Were they workshopping dialogue? Was my marriage turning into community theater? I pressed closer to the wall, careful not to make a sound, my heart pounding so loud I was convinced they could hear it through the door. So I'm thinking, Camilla began, and I could tell she was doing that thing where she paced while talking, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I'll wait until the music gets lowered for the cake, right? Everyone will already be paying attention. Then I'll turn to Daniel and say something like, we need to talk, really serious, you know? And then I'll say, I've been thinking, and I don't think this marriage is working anymore. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour, but it was probably only a few seconds. My brain was trying to process the words I'd just heard, while simultaneously trying to convince me I'd misheard. Maybe she said this marriage is really working, and I just had selective hearing? Maybe I was having a stroke? Maybe this was all a nightmare, and I'd wake up, and everything would be fine? Oh my God, Brooke gasped, breaking the silence. That's brutal. I love it. Of course she loved it. Brooke loved anything that involved drama that wasn't happening to her. She was the kind of person who watched reality TV and genuinely believed she'd handle situations better than the people on screen, never mind that her biggest life challenge had been choosing between 2 yacht clubs for her membership. And that's when we all jump in, right? Chantel asked, always the strategist. We act all supportive, tell her she deserves better, really play it up? I could hear the excitement building in her voice, like they were planning a surprise party instead of orchestrating the public humiliation of another human being. My human being. The guy who'd spent the last 3 hours setting up their stupid party and listening to their stupid conversations about their stupid lives. Exactly, Camilla practically shouted, then lowered her voice, probably remembering that sound travels in expensive lofts. When I say, this marriage isn't working, you all need to laugh a little, like you're uncomfortable, but also kind of saw it coming. And then say stuff like, you deserve so much better, and we've been worried about you. Really sell it, you know? She was literally directing them. This was a production. My marriage was being turned into a theatrical performance for the amusement of people who thought empathy was a type of imported cheese. What do you think he'll do? Tiffany asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, like she was asking about a science experiment. Will he cry? Beg? Oh God, what if he makes a scene? The way she said, makes a scene, dripped with anticipation. She wanted me to make a scene. They all did. This wasn't just about humiliating me. It was about creating a moment they could rehash at brunch for the next 6 months. Remember when Camilla fake-dumped Daniel, and he totally lost it? Classic. He'll probably just stand there looking pathetic, Camilla said, and the casual cruelty in her voice hit me like a freight train. He never knows what to say when I put him on the spot. He'll stammer, maybe try to laugh it off, and then I'll let it go on for just long enough before I say, just kidding, and everyone will laugh, and it'll be this whole hilarious moment. Hilarious. She thought destroying my dignity in front of strangers would be hilarious. This woman I'd married, the one I'd supported through her failed business ventures and listened to complain about her friends for hours, thought using me as a prop in her comedy sketch was good entertainment. The reality of what I'd just heard settled over me like a wet blanket. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a joke I wasn't in on. This was calculated, planned, rehearsed humiliation. Camilla and her terrible friends had sat in that room and choreographed my public embarrassment like it was a TikTok dance. And they'd done it casually, easily, like it was the most natural thing in the world to treat your husband like a punching bag for social media clout. I stood there in that hallway, holding those ridiculous wine glasses, and something inside me shifted. The anger was there, sure, bubbling up like lava, but there was something else too. Clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw the situation exactly as it was. I wasn't a partner to Camilla, I was an accessory. I wasn't a husband, I was a supporting character in her never-ending quest for validation from people who didn't actually care about her. And tonight, I was supposed to be the comic relief, the bumbling fool who got dumped for laughs. But here's the thing about eavesdropping. Sometimes you hear exactly what you need to hear to make a decision you've been avoiding. And as I stood there, listening to these women plot my humiliation like it was a harmless prank, I made a choice. If Camilla wanted a show, I'd give her a show. Just not the one she'd rehearsed. Not even close. Because the best thing about being underestimated is that people never see you coming when you finally decide to play the game. And I was about to play it better than any of them could have imagined. So here's a fun fact about human psychology. When someone plans to publicly humiliate you and you find out about it beforehand, you have two options. Option A is to confront them immediately, cause a scene, and let your emotions run wild like a toddler who missed nap time. Option B is to play it cool, let them think they're still in control, and wait for the perfect moment to detonate their entire plan in their faces. Guess which option I chose? If you guessed option A, you don't know me at all, and frankly, you haven't been paying attention. I walked back into the main party area carrying those wine glasses like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just overheard my wife and her discount Desperate Housewives cast members planning my public execution. My hands were steady, my face was calm, and internally I was running through every possible scenario like a chess grandmaster on espresso. The key to pulling off what I was about to do was simple. Act completely normal. Be the same agreeable, slightly awkward husband they all expected. Give them absolutely zero reason to suspect that I knew anything. Method acting, baby. Daniel Day-Lewis would have been proud. I set the glasses down on the kitchen counter and immediately made my way to the bar setup. If I was going to survive the next few hours of this psychological warfare disguised as a birthday party, I was going to need alcohol. Not the fancy stuff Camilla had purchased for her guests, oh no. I reached into the back of the cabinet and pulled out the good bourbon, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Well, finding out your wife thinks you're a human prop definitely qualified as special, even if it wasn't the kind of special Hallmark makes cards for. I poured myself 3 fingers worth, no ice, and took a long sip. The burn felt appropriate, like my insides were matching my emotional state. Around me, the party was starting to fill up with exactly the kind of people you'd expect at a Tiffany birthday bash. Men in sport coats that cost more than my monthly salary, discussing cryptocurrency and real estate investments like they were saving the world. Women in dresses that required special undergarments and probably came with insurance policies, talking about their Pilates instructors and their upcoming trips to the Maldives. Everyone air-kissing, everyone fake-laughing, everyone performing their assigned role in this theater of the absurd. Daniel. A voice cut through my thoughts, and I turned to see Marcus, one of the few normal people in Camilla's extended social circle. He worked in finance, but hadn't completely sold his soul yet, which made him an outlier in this crowd. Man, you look like you need that drink. Rough night. He clinked his glass against mine, and I forced a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. You have no idea, I said, taking another sip. Just doing my part to make sure Tiffany's 30th is memorable. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Oh, it was going to be memorable, all right. People would be talking about this party for years, just not for the reasons Camilla and her crew were expecting. Marcus laughed and launched into a story about some disaster at his office, and I nodded along, giving him just enough attention to seem engaged while my mind was elsewhere, plotting and planning. Across the room, I could see Camilla holding court with her friends, all of them clustered together like a pack of well-dressed hyenas. Every so often, one of them would glance my way, and I'd catch this little smirk, this knowing look that said, just wait. Tiffany kept checking her phone, probably timing out when the big moment would happen. Brooke was practically vibrating with excitement, like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. And Chantel, ever the cool one, was sipping her wine and surveying the room like a general before a battle. I made a point of circulating through the party, being extra friendly, extra helpful, extra normal. I complimented some guy named Brad on his watch, even though it looked like something a Bond villain would wear. I listened to a woman named Stephanie explain her new interior designer for 15 minutes, nodding at all the right moments, even though I couldn't have cared less about her choice between eggshell and cream for her dining room walls. I was the picture of the agreeable husband, the supportive partner, The guy who knew his place in the social hierarchy and was comfortable with it. But inside I was composing my response, rehearsing my lines, preparing for the performance of a lifetime. See, the thing about people like Camilla and her friends is that they operate on a very specific set of assumptions. They assume that because I'm quiet, I'm weak. They assume that because I don't flaunt money I don't have, I lack confidence. They assume that because I've put up with their nonsense for years, I'll continue to put up with it indefinitely. These assumptions were about to get shattered like a wine glass at a Greek wedding. Daniel, sweetie, can you help me with something in the kitchen? Camilla appeared at my elbow, her hand touching my arm in that possessive way she had. Up close, I could see the excitement in her eyes, barely concealed behind her practiced smile. This was it. She was setting up the stage, getting me into position for the big performance. I wanted to laugh, to tell her right then and there that I knew everything, but that would have ruined the surprise. And after what I'd overheard, I deserved to have a little fun too. Of course, honey, I said, matching her fake sweetness with my own. Whatever you need. We walked toward the kitchen, and I could feel eyes following us. Her friends had taken up strategic positions around the room, phones out, ready to capture the moment for posterity and probably Instagram. The music was getting lower, conversations were naturally quieting down, and I realized with dark amusement that they'd actually choreographed this whole thing down to the soundtrack. Tiffany sidled up next to us, playing her part perfectly. Oh, Camilla, are you okay? You look stressed. The concern in her voice was about as genuine as a $3 bill, but she delivered the line with the conviction of someone who definitely practiced in front of a mirror. I had to hand it to them. They'd really committed to this bit. If only they'd put this much effort into being decent human beings. I'm fine, Tiff, Camilla said, her voice already taking on that theatrical quality. Actually, you know what? I'm not fine. Daniel and I need to talk. Right now? In front of everyone. She turned to face the crowd, which had conveniently gathered closer, forming a perfect semicircle around us like we were about to perform a scene from a soap opera. Which, in a way, we were. I took another sip of my bourbon and settled into my role. My face was neutral, maybe slightly confused, exactly what they'd expect from me. Internally, I was running through my response one more time, making sure every word was perfect, every pause calculated. I'd learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't loud or messy. It's cold, precise, and completely unexpected. It's giving people exactly what they asked for in a way they never saw coming. Brooke moved closer, her phone definitely recording now. Chantel positioned herself where she could see both Camilla and me, her face already arranged in an expression of concerned support. Other guests were whispering, sensing drama, that universal human instinct that makes us all rubberneck at car accidents. The stage was set, the actors were in position, and the audience was primed. Everything was going exactly according to Camilla's plan. Except for one tiny detail. I wasn't following the script. I wasn't going to be the stammering, confused husband who got humiliated for their entertainment. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt or embarrassed. I was going to take their little prank and flip it so hard they'd need a chiropractor. Because here's what they'd forgotten in all their planning and rehearsing. I'd been watching them play their social games for years. I'd been taking notes. I'd been learning. And I was about to graduate with honors. Camilla cleared her throat, and the room went even quieter. Someone actually turned off the music completely, and the silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She looked at me with those big eyes, the ones she used when she wanted something, and opened her mouth to deliver her prepared lines. This was it. The moment she'd been building up to, the one she and her friends had giggled about in the guest room like middle schoolers planning a prank. I stood there, bourbon in hand, face calm, heart rate steady, and waited. Let her have her moment. Let her say her piece. Let her think, just for a few more seconds, that this was going to go the way she'd planned. Because the look on her face when I flipped the script was going to be worth every second of humiliation she'd intended for me. They wanted a show? They wanted drama? They wanted something to talk about at brunch for the next 6 months? Oh, I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. And unlike their carefully rehearsed nonsense, mine was going to be completely, beautifully, devastatingly improvised. The moment arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train crashing through a china shop. Camilla took a deep breath, the kind actors take before delivering their Oscar-winning monologue, and I had to suppress the urge to slow clap. The dedication to the performance was honestly impressive. If she'd put this much effort into our actual marriage, we might not be standing here in front of 30 people who were salivating at the prospect of witnessing someone else's relationship implode. But hey, priorities, right? Daniel, she began, her voice projecting across the room like she was performing at the Globe Theater. We need to talk. Ah, yes, the 4 words that have struck fear into the hearts of men since the beginning of time. The phrase that makes your stomach drop, your palms sweat, and your brain immediately start cataloging every possible thing you might have done wrong in the past 6 months. Dishes in the sink? Forgot an anniversary? Breathed too loudly? The possibilities were endless, and every guy in that room probably felt a sympathetic twinge of dread. Except I didn't feel dread. I felt something closer to anticipation, like a poker player holding a royal flush while everyone else at the table was betting big on their mediocre hands. I took a casual sip of my bourbon and raised my eyebrows in what I hoped was a convincing impression of mild concern. Okay, I said simply, my voice steady. What's up? See, the thing about playing dumb is that you have to commit to it completely. Can't overdo it, can't underdo it. Just enough confusion to seem genuine. The crowd had formed a perfect circle around us now, like we were gladiators in the world's most passive-aggressive coliseum. I could see Brooke practically bouncing on her heels, her phone held at the perfect angle to capture Camilla's face. Tiffany was biting her lip, probably trying not to smile too early and ruin the serious tone they were going for. Chantel stood with her arms crossed, already wearing her supportive friend expression like a costume. And in the background, I could see other guests whispering, exchanging glances, that universal human reflex that makes us all gather around drama like moths to a flame. Camilla's hand went to her chest, right over her heart, in a gesture I'd seen her practice in the mirror before. She was really selling this. I've been thinking, she continued, her voice wavering just slightly for effect, and I've realized something important. She paused for dramatic effect, letting the tension build. Someone in the crowd actually gasped softly. A man I didn't recognize had his mouth slightly open, fully invested in this theater production. I don't think this marriage is working anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, a mouse sneeze, a snowflake land. Every single person in that room stopped breathing simultaneously. It was like someone had hit pause on reality itself. I watched the words hang in the air between us, saw the expectation on Camilla's face, the anticipation on her friends' faces, the shock on everyone else's faces. They were all waiting for me to crumble, to beg, to make a scene, to give them the show they'd paid admission for. Instead, I nodded slowly, like I was considering what she'd said with great thoughtfulness. I swirled my bourbon in my glass, took another sip, and let the moment stretch just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Then I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a sad smile, but a genuine, relieved smile that came from somewhere deep in my soul. You know what? I said, my voice clear and calm. You're absolutely right. The confusion on Camilla's face was instantaneous and beautiful. Her mouth opened slightly, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed, and I could see her brain trying to process what I'd just said. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't what she'd rehearsed with her Greek chorus of terrible friends. I was supposed to stammer, to look hurt, to ask what she meant. I wasn't supposed to agree with her. Wait, she said, her theatrical voice faltering into something more genuine. What? The single word came out strangled, confused, like she'd just been told the sky was actually green and needed a moment to recalibrate her entire understanding of reality. Behind her, I could see Tiffany's smile freeze on her face. Brooke's phone dipped slightly, like she wasn't sure if this was still worth recording. Chantel's arms uncrossed, her carefully composed expression cracking into something that looked like genuine surprise. You're right, I repeated, louder this time so everyone could hear. This marriage isn't working. It's been a disaster, honestly. So yeah, let's call it. We're done. Finished. Over. Congratulations on your freedom. I raised my glass in a mock toast, and the bourbon caught the light perfectly, like even the alcohol was in on the joke. I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, because clearly it wasn't me. A guy in a velvet suit, some tech bro named Tyler or Trevor or Chad, actually choked on his champagne. The sound broke the silence like a gunshot, and suddenly the room erupted into confused murmurs. People were looking at each other, trying to figure out if this was part of the plan or if they were witnessing an actual divorce announcement. Camilla just stood there, frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish that had suddenly found itself on dry land. "You're not serious," she finally managed to say, but her voice had lost all its theatrical power. Now she just sounded uncertain, vulnerable, and very, very confused. "You can't just agree with me. That's not. You're supposed to." She gestured vaguely with her hands, like she was trying to physically grab the words she needed from the air around her. "Supposed to what?" I asked, genuinely curious about how she'd finish that sentence. "Fight for you? Beg you to reconsider? Break down crying in front of all these people?" I gestured around the room at the captivated audience. "Nah, I'm good. If you're not happy, I'm not happy. So let's just rip the Band-Aid off, you know? You can keep the apartment, the furniture, all of it. I'll take my stuff and go. Hell, you can even keep the blender. I know how much you love your morning smoothies." The casual way I was discussing the end of our marriage was clearly not what anyone had expected. A woman I vaguely recognized from Camilla's yoga class had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Marcus, my finance buddy from earlier, was staring at me with something that looked suspiciously like admiration mixed with absolute horror. And Tiffany, the birthday girl herself, looked like someone had just told her the party was canceled and everyone had to go home. "Daniel, this isn't funny," Camilla said, and now there was an edge of panic in her voice. The careful composure was cracking, revealing something raw underneath. "You can't just—" I wasn't being serious. This was supposed to be. She stopped herself, realizing too late that she was about to admit the whole thing was a setup. Her eyes darted to Tiffany, then to Brooke, looking for some kind of lifeline, some way to salvage this disaster. But I wasn't done yet. "Oh no, I was just getting warmed up." "You weren't serious?" I said, letting genuine confusion color my voice. "But you sounded so serious. You said our marriage isn't working, which, honestly, I've been thinking the same thing for months but didn't want to rock the boat. So thank you, actually, for being brave enough to say it out loud. Really, this is great. We can get the paperwork started next week, split everything down the middle, and move on with our lives. Clean break, no hard feelings." "Stop it," Camilla whispered, but her voice carried in the silent room. "Just stop." The desperation was real now, leaking through every syllable. This wasn't the fun prank she'd imagined. This wasn't the harmless joke that would end in laughter and Instagram stories. This was real, and it was happening, and she had no idea how to stop it because I'd taken her own weapon and turned it against her. "Stop what?" I asked innocently. "Agreeing with you? Being supportive of your decision? I mean, you're right, Camilla. We're not happy. You spend all your time with your friends. I work too much. We barely talk anymore. And when we do, it's usually you telling me how I'm not living up to your expectations. This has been coming for a while, and you were brave enough to pull the trigger. I respect that." Brooke finally found her voice, jumping in like the loyal friend she pretended to be. "Camilla was just expressing her feelings, Daniel. You don't have to be so dramatic about it." The irony of her calling me dramatic when they'd literally staged this entire confrontation was so thick you could spread it on toast, but I let it slide. "Dramatic?" I laughed, a genuine laugh that probably sounded slightly unhinged. "I'm being the opposite of dramatic. I'm being practical." She said the marriage isn't working. I agreed. Now we move forward. What's dramatic about that? Would it be more dramatic if I fell to my knees and begged her to stay? Cried? Made a scene? I looked around at the crowd, all these people who'd come for entertainment and were getting way more than they'd bargained for. I'm just trying to handle this like an adult. Camilla's face had gone through several shades of pale, finally settling on something close to gray. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the genuine distress that was written across every feature. "You're seriously not going to fight for me?" she asked, and there was something heartbreaking in her voice, something real that cut through all the pretense and performance. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to give up?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I felt something close to pity. But then I remembered the conversation in the guest room, the laughter, the planning, the casual cruelty of turning your spouse into a punchline for your friend's amusement. And the pity evaporated like morning dew. "Give up," I said softly. "Camilla, I fight for things that are worth fighting for. You just publicly announced that our marriage is over. What exactly am I supposed to be fighting for here? Your right to humiliate me?" Your need for attention? Come on. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's drinks. Somewhere in the background, I could hear the faint sound of traffic from the street below, a reminder that outside this bizarre bubble of manufactured drama, the real world was still turning. And it was to that real world that I was about to return, leaving behind this circus and everyone in it. If you've never witnessed 30 wealthy people experiencing collective discomfort at the same time, let me tell you, it's a sight to behold. The silence that had descended over Tiffany's living room was the kind of silence you could bottle and sell as a sound effects track for horror movies. It was thick, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. I could practically hear the sound of pearls being clutched, stock portfolios being nervously checked, and prenups being mentally reviewed. This was not the kind of entertainment these people had signed up for. Camilla was still standing there, frozen like someone had hit pause on her personal remote control. Her mouth was open, forming words that refused to come out, and her eyes had that deer-in-headlights quality that would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Behind her, the holy trinity of terrible friends looked like they'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion and couldn't look away. Tiffany's birthday crown, a ridiculous sparkly thing she'd been wearing ironically, sat crooked on her head, making her look less like a celebration and more like a tragedy. Brooke had finally lowered her phone completely, apparently deciding that this footage was either too good or too traumatizing to keep recording. And Chantel, always the most composed of the group, had her hand over her mouth like she was physically trying to stop herself from saying something that would make this situation worse. Wait, Camilla finally managed, her voice coming out in a strangled whisper that somehow carried across the entire room. What? It was the same word she'd said before, but this time it had a different quality to it. Less confused, more panicked. Like she was a computer that had just blue-screened and was desperately trying to reboot before everything crashed permanently. I took another leisurely sip of my bourbon, savoring both the taste and the moment. What part was unclear? I asked, tilting my head in genuine curiosity. You said the marriage isn't working. I agreed. Pretty straightforward conversation, really. I mean, I've had more complicated interactions with customer service representatives. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd at that, quickly stifled when people realized this maybe wasn't the time for amusement. But the damage was done. The tension had cracked, just slightly, and reality was starting to seep through. You're humiliating me, Camilla hissed, her voice sharp and low, meant only for me, but definitely loud enough for the people closest to us to hear. The accusation hung in the air like smoke, and I had to fight the urge to laugh directly in her face. The sheer audacity of that statement, coming from the woman who'd literally planned to humiliate me as a party trick, was so absurd it almost looped back around to being impressive. Oh, sweetheart, I said, and I made sure to use the exact same condescending tone she'd used with me earlier when critiquing my outfit. You already booked that role yourself. I gestured vaguely at the room full of witnesses. I'm just the guy who agreed with you. If you're feeling humiliated right now, maybe ask yourself why. I let that sink in for a moment, watching her face cycle through about 15 different emotions in rapid succession. You brought this up in front of all these people. You made it public. You made it a spectacle. I just didn't follow your script. Marcus, bless him, chose that moment to take a very large sip of his drink, and the sound of him swallowing was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Someone coughed. Another person shifted their weight, and their shoes squeaked against the hardwood floor. These people, who probably attended board meetings and charity galas without breaking a sweat, were completely out of their depth when it came to witnessing authentic human conflict. They wanted drama, sure, but the sanitized kind, the kind you watch on reality TV while eating gourmet popcorn. Not this raw, unscripted disaster unfolding in real time. Tiffany finally decided to earn her position as ringleader and stepped forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. Okay, everyone, let's just take a breath here, she said in her best hostess voice, the one she probably used when guests got too drunk at her parties. I think there's been a misunderstanding. She looked between Camilla and me like a referee trying to break up a boxing match. Camilla, maybe you want to clarify what you meant. I would love to hear the clarification, I said cheerfully, turning to face my wife fully. Please, enlighten me. What did you mean when you said our marriage isn't working? Because I interpreted that as, our marriage isn't working, But apparently, I'm not sophisticated enough to understand the nuances of high society communication. Camilla's eyes were starting to get that shiny quality that meant tears were incoming, and I could see her friends exchanging panicked glances. This was supposed to be fun for them, a harmless prank that would end with everyone laughing and me looking slightly foolish but ultimately fine. Instead, they'd created a genuine crisis, and none of them knew how to fix it because none of them had ever actually dealt with real consequences before in their entire privileged lives. She just wanted to see if you still care, Brooke blurted out, immediately looking like she regretted opening her mouth. But the words were out there now, floating in the air like a confession at a murder trial. The room somehow got even quieter, if that was possible. A woman in the corner was clutching her wine glass, so hard I was genuinely worried it might shatter. I turned to look at Brooke, letting my expression shift into something resembling pity mixed with disbelief. She wanted to see if I still care. I repeated slowly, like I was testing out a foreign language. By publicly announcing she wants to end our marriage. In front of 30 people. At a party. I nodded thoughtfully. You know, that's actually fascinating. It's like emotional manipulation disguised as a social experiment. Very cutting edge. Very modern. Should probably be studied by psychologists. Don't be an asshole, Chantel snapped, finally finding her voice. Her composure had returned somewhat, and she was clearly trying to regain control of the situation. You know what she meant. It was supposed to be a joke. A joke, I said flatly. Right? Hey, everyone. I raised my voice and addressed the crowd directly. Quick question. How many of you thought this was funny? Show of hands. I looked around the room, making eye contact with various people. Not a single hand went up. In fact, most people suddenly became very interested in their shoes, their drinks, or the very fascinating ceiling tiles. Huh. Weird. Looks like the joke didn't land. A man I recognized as someone's husband, couldn't remember whose, cleared his throat nervously. Maybe we should all just, give them some privacy, he suggested weakly, but nobody moved. It was like watching a nature documentary where the prey is frozen, hoping the predator won't notice them if they stay perfectly still. These people had come for entertainment, and by God, they were going to see how this played out, even if it made them uncomfortable enough to need therapy afterwards. No, please stay, I said, waving my hand magnanimously. After all, Camilla made this a public conversation. Would be rude to exclude everyone now. I turned back to my wife, who looked like she was rapidly cycling through the 5 stages of grief and getting stuck on denial. So let me get this straight. You wanted to test my devotion to you by pretending to dump me in front of all your friends, and you expected me to what exactly? Beg? Cry? Profess my undying love while everyone recorded it for social media? Camilla started, but her voice cracked, and she had to stop. A single tear rolled down her cheek, ruining her carefully applied mascara. Part of me, a very small part that still remembered the woman I'd married 3 years ago, felt bad. But that part was quickly drowned out by the memory of her laughing with her friends about how pathetic I'd look when they executed their little plan. And I just wanted to see if gravity still works. I continued, my voice conversational. You know Newton's law? What goes up must come down. Well, congratulations, we both got our answers tonight. I raised my glass again in another mock toast. You wanted to see if I still care, and I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped playing along with your games. Turns out, the answer to both questions is pretty enlightening. Tyler or Trevor or Chad, the velvet suit guy who'd choked earlier, was now leaning against the wall like he needed physical support to process what he was witnessing. His champagne glass hung loosely in his hand, forgotten. Next to him, his date, a blonde woman in a dress that probably cost more than my car, was whispering something in his ear, but he just shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on the unfolding drama like it was a train wreck he couldn't look away from. You seriously expect us to believe you don't care at all? Tiffany asked, her birthday girl entitlement finally overriding her shock. You've been married for 3 years. You're just going to throw that away because of one misunderstanding. One misunderstanding. I repeated, letting the words roll around in my mouth like fine wine. Is that what we're calling premeditated emotional manipulation now? Good to know. I'll update my vocabulary. I set my empty glass down on the nearest surface with a decisive click. And you're right, 3 years is a long time. long enough to realize when someone views you as a prop in their personal reality show rather than an actual human being with feelings. The room had divided into two clear camps now. People who thought I was being cruel, and people who were starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I had a point. I could see it in their faces, the slow dawning comprehension that this situation was way more complicated than a simple misunderstanding. Marcus caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod, and I realized he'd figured it out. He knew this had been a setup, and he knew I'd somehow discovered it. Camilla was full-on crying now, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking. "Please," she said, and the word came out broken. "Please, Daniel. I made a mistake. Can we just talk about this privately?" The irony of her asking for privacy after deliberately making our relationship issues a public spectacle wasn't lost on me, or apparently, on several other people in the room, based on the skeptical looks being exchanged. "Privately," I said, and I couldn't keep the bitter laugh out of my voice. "Now you want privacy? After this whole performance? After you literally gathered an audience to witness what you thought would be my humiliation?" I shook my head slowly. "Nah. You wanted a show, remember? You wanted it to be iconic, wasn't that the word? Well, here's your encore." Watching Camilla's face turn various shades of red was like watching a time-lapse of a sunset, except instead of being beautiful, it was the visual representation of someone's ego imploding in real time. Her carefully constructed facade was cracking like cheap porcelain, and underneath it all was panic. Pure, unadulterated, designer label-wearing panic. She looked around at her friends desperately, silently begging them to do something, say something, fix this disaster they'd all created together like a group project gone horribly wrong. "You're humiliating me," she said again, louder this time, as if increasing the volume would somehow make the accusation more valid. Her voice had taken on a shrill quality that made several people wince. A waiter who'd been frozen in the corner holding a tray of canapes finally decided this was his cue to exit and practically sprinted toward the kitchen. Smart man. Probably had better survival instincts than half the people in this room. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me shifted from anger to something colder. Something final. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, and I made sure my voice dripped with the exact same patronizing sweetness she'd used on me for months. "You already booked that role yourself. I'm just a supporting character, remember?" I gestured around at the sea of stunned faces. "You cast yourself as the star of this little drama. You wrote the script. You directed the scene. You even provided the audience. All I did was deliver my lines differently than you expected." The metaphor seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed several times, making her look like an extremely well-dressed fish gasping for air. Behind her, Brooke was frantically whispering something to Chantel, probably trying to figure out damage control strategies. Tiffany had abandoned her birthday crown entirely, setting it on a nearby table like even she couldn't maintain the pretense of celebration anymore. This party had officially become a wake for my marriage, except nobody had brought appropriate funeral attire. "This is insane," Camilla finally managed to say, her voice breaking on the last word. "You're acting insane. Over nothing. It was just supposed to be funny." There was that word again. Funny. Like emotional manipulation was just another form of entertainment, like pranking your spouse was equivalent to surprising them with breakfast in bed. The disconnect was so profound I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Funny," I repeated, tasting the word like it was something bitter. "You know what's funny? I barely fight for gym motivation, darling. So what made you think I'd fight for this?" I gestured vaguely between us, encompassing our entire relationship in one dismissive wave. "You wanted to see if I'd beg, if I'd plead, if I'd make a fool of myself trying to keep you. Congratulations on getting your answer." A woman I'd never seen before, probably someone's +1 who was deeply regretting her decision to attend this party, actually gasped out loud. The sound cut through the tension like a knife through butter, and suddenly people remembered they were supposed to be breathing. The room came alive with nervous movements. Someone shifted their weight. Another person took a sip of wine. A man adjusted his collar. All those little human movements that happen when people are deeply uncomfortable but can't leave because they're trapped by social obligation and morbid curiosity. Brooke, emboldened by desperation or stupidity, decided to step into the fray. "Daniel, you're being unnecessarily harsh," she said. her voice carrying that particular tone rich people use when they're trying to sound reasonable, but really just sound entitled. Camilla is clearly upset. Can't you see that? Have some compassion. The audacity of her asking me for compassion after they'd literally planned to humiliate me as party entertainment was so staggering I actually had to pause and process it. I turned to face Brooke directly, and she actually took a small step backward. Good. Maybe some survival instinct was finally kicking in. Compassion, I said slowly, like I was explaining a complex concept to a child. You want me to have compassion for someone who gathered her friends, rehearsed lines about ending our marriage, and planned to perform this whole scene for laughs. That's what you're asking me for right now. Compassion. It wasn't like that. Brooke protested weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew it was exactly like that. They all knew it. The only question was whether they'd admit it or continue to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. Really? I asked, raising my eyebrows. What was it like then? Enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like a group of bored rich people decided to use someone's actual marriage as entertainment because their lives are so devoid of genuine meaning they have to manufacture drama to feel alive. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Sometimes the truth is harsh. Sometimes it needs to be. Chantel's jaw dropped open so fast I'm surprised it didn't dislocate. Several other people in the room made various sounds of shock and discomfort. Tyler Trevor Chad put his hand over his mouth like he was physically trying to stop himself from reacting. And Marcus, my man Marcus, was looking at me with something that resembled awe mixed with concern, like he couldn't decide if I was having a breakdown or the most impressive moment of clarity in my entire life. That's cruel, Tiffany said quietly, and for once she didn't sound performative. She sounded genuinely hurt, which would have meant more if she hadn't been one of the architects of this disaster. We're Camilla's friends. We care about her. We were just trying to help her figure out if you still loved her. By making her fake dump me in public, I said, nodding slowly. Yes, that's a very normal and healthy way to assess relationship dynamics. They should teach that in therapy school. Chapter 7. Emotional Manipulation as a Diagnostic Tool. Very cutting-edge stuff. The sarcasm was so thick you could spread it on bread, but I was beyond caring about being polite. Polite had gotten me into this situation. Honesty was going to get me out. Camilla wiped at her face, smearing her mascara even more, creating dark streaks down her cheeks that made her look like a sad clown. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she said, her voice small and broken. In front of everyone. You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to protect me. And there it was. The core of the entire issue, laid bare for everyone to see. In Camilla's world, love meant never holding her accountable. Protection meant shielding her from the consequences of her own actions. She could plan my humiliation, execute it in front of 30 people, and somehow I was the villain for not playing along. The mental gymnastics required to maintain that worldview could have won Olympic gold. Protect you? I asked, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. Quieter, but somehow more dangerous. From what exactly? From yourself? From your own choices? From the consequences of treating your husband like a prop in your personal reality show. I shook my head slowly. I can't protect you from that, Camilla. Nobody can. You're twisting everything, she cried, and now she was fully sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Part of me, that stupid part that still remembered our wedding day and the way she used to laugh at my jokes, wanted to comfort her. But that part was buried under 3 years of being slowly diminished, corrected, and treated like an accessory rather than a partner. I'm not twisting anything, I said calmly. I'm just refusing to let you rewrite history 5 minutes after it happened. You said our marriage isn't working. In front of all these people. With your friends backing you up. That happened. That's reality. The fact that you didn't expect me to agree doesn't change what you said. An older man I vaguely recognized, probably someone's father or uncle, cleared his throat. Son, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen a lot of life. Maybe you should think about what you're throwing away here. Marriage is about forgiveness. His tone was gentle, grandfatherly, and probably would have worked on someone who didn't know the full context of the situation. You're absolutely right, sir, I said, nodding respectfully. Marriage is about forgiveness. It's also about respect, trust, and not using your partner as entertainment for your friends. When those things disappear, Forgiveness becomes a band-aid on a bullet wound. Looks nice, doesn't fix the problem. The old man frowned, clearly not expecting that response, but he didn't push further. Smart man. Knew when to retreat. More people in this room could have learned from his example. Camilla was looking around wildly now, searching for someone, anyone, who would support her version of events. Why is everyone just standing there? She demanded, her voice rising to a pitch that probably bothered dogs in a 3-block radius. He's being cruel. He's being heartless. Someone say something. But here's the thing about public spectacles. They cut both ways. When you make your private drama public, you don't get to control how people react to it. And judging by the uncomfortable faces around the room, people were starting to do the math and realize that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the bad guy in this scenario. Maybe the woman who'd staged a fake breakup for attention was getting exactly what she'd asked for, just not in the way she'd wanted. What do you want them to say, Camilla? I asked, spreading my hands in a gesture of genuine curiosity. That I'm wrong? That you didn't plan this? That I should ignore what you said and pretend everything's fine? I laughed, but it was a hollow sound. That's not how reality works. You can't just reset the game when you don't like how it's going. I hate you, she whispered, but it came out loud enough for everyone to hear. I hate you so much right now. That's fair, I said, and I meant it. Hate's honest, at least. More honest than this whole setup was. I looked around the room one more time, at all these people who'd come for a birthday party and gotten front row seats to a marriage dissolution. But here's the thing about hate, Camilla. It requires energy. It requires caring. And I'm all out of both. The finality in my voice seemed to register with her on some level, because her face crumpled in a way that might have broken my heart if my heart hadn't already been shattered by her casual cruelty. But I was done. Done with the games. Done with the manipulation. Done with being treated like a supporting character in someone else's story. It was time for my exit. And unlike Camilla's carefully choreographed performance, mine was going to be real. There's something poetic about a good exit. Not the dramatic door slamming, glass breaking, soap opera kind of exit that everyone expects. No, the really powerful exits are the quiet ones. The ones where you simply turn around, walk away, and leave everyone else to sit in the wreckage they created. That's the kind of exit I was planning. The kind that would live in these people's memories longer than any tantrum ever could. The kind that said more with silence than screaming ever would. I turned toward the door, and I swear I felt every single pair of eyes in that room lock onto me like heat-seeking missiles. The movement was slow, deliberate, the physical embodiment of, I'm done with this conversation and everything it represents. My feet, which had been rooted to that spot for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, finally remembered how to move. One step, then another. The distance between me and that door was maybe 20 feet, but it felt like walking across the Grand Canyon. Daniel, wait. Camilla's voice cracked through the silence like a whip, desperate and raw in a way I'd never heard before. Not when we'd fought about her spending habits. Not when I'd suggested maybe we should spend more time together and less time with her friends. Not even during the actual hard conversations about our future. This was different. This was the sound of someone realizing they'd just set their entire life on fire and the extinguisher was walking away. I paused, but I didn't turn around. That would have given her hope, and hope was the last thing this situation needed. Hope was what kept people trapped in toxic patterns, convincing themselves that things would change when they never did. Why? I asked, my voice carrying across the silent room. We just broke up, remember? You said it yourself. The marriage isn't working. I'm just respecting your wishes. Behind me, I could hear movement. Probably Camilla taking a step forward, or maybe one of her friends trying to physically stop her from making this worse. Someone knocked over a glass, and the sound of it hitting the floor, but not breaking, was somehow more jarring than if it had shattered. Life imitating art, or in this case, a relationship that should have broken cleanly, but instead just kept rolling, causing more damage with every rotation. You know that's not what I meant. Camilla shouted, and there was anger mixed with the desperation now. Good. Anger I could work with. Anger was honest. You're twisting my words. You're making me look like a villain when I was just. She stopped herself, probably realizing that finishing that sentence with just trying to humiliate you for fun wouldn't help her case. I finally turned around, but I didn't walk back toward her. I stayed right where I was, one hand on the doorframe, my body language screaming, I'm halfway out of here already. The visual probably looked like something out of a movie, the wrong protagonist making his exit while the antagonist begs him to stay. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my actual life, and I was the only one who got to direct it anymore. Making you look like a villain? I repeated, and I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. Camilla, you did that all by yourself. I'm just the guy who refused to play the victim. I looked around at all the frozen faces, at Tiffany still clutching her forgotten birthday crown, at Brooke with her phone hanging uselessly at her side, at Chantel who'd finally run out of smooth words to make this situation better. You wanted drama. You wanted a scene. You wanted something iconic to talk about at your next brunch. Well, congratulations. You got your season finale. People were whispering now, not even trying to be subtle about it. A woman near the bar was texting furiously, probably updating someone who'd missed the show. Tyler Trevor Chad was shaking his head slowly, like he'd just witnessed something that challenged his entire understanding of relationship dynamics. And Marcus, my boy Marcus, caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod of approval. That nod meant more than any of the other reactions combined, because Marcus was real. Marcus didn't perform for an audience. Marcus was the kind of friend who'd help you move bodies at 3 a.m., no questions asked. Please, Camilla said, and the word came out as barely more than a whisper, but somehow it carried across the entire room. Please don't leave like this. Not in front of everyone. Can we just talk? Privately? Like adults? The irony of her asking to act like adults after staging a public breakup prank wasn't lost on anyone, based on the uncomfortable shifting happening around the room. Adults, I said, nodding slowly. Right? Because adults definitely plan elaborate schemes to embarrass their spouses in front of 30 witnesses. That's peak maturity right there. Should probably be in textbooks. I adjusted my grip on the doorframe, and several people actually leaned forward, like they were afraid I might bolt and they'd miss the conclusion of this drama. You made this public, Camilla. You brought all these people into our relationship. You don't get to suddenly demand privacy when the script didn't go your way. Tiffany finally found her voice again, though it came out smaller than her usual performative volume. Daniel, this is my birthday party. Can you please not do this here? Not now. The entitlement was staggering. Her birthday party, where she'd helped orchestrate my humiliation, and somehow I was the one being rude by not playing along. The mental gymnastics required to maintain that logic could have won Olympic gold. Your birthday party, I repeated, and I actually smiled at her. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that says, I see exactly what you are, and I'm not impressed. You're right, Tiffany. This is your party. Your special day. The day you helped your best friend plan to publicly humiliate her husband for entertainment. Happy 30th. Hope it was everything you dreamed it would be. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again, cycling through colors like a malfunctioning traffic light. Brooke put a hand on her shoulder, probably offering comfort, but Tiffany shrugged it off. Even she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, they'd miscalculated. That maybe treating people like props in their social media reality show had consequences. Novel concept, I know. You're cruel, Chantel said, her voice cold and sharp like a knife. You're standing there acting like you're better than all of us. But look what you're doing to her. Look at Camilla. She's falling apart, and you don't even care. She gestured dramatically at my wife, who was indeed falling apart, mascara running, dress rumpled, the picture of distress. It would have been more effective if I hadn't known the whole thing was manufactured drama gone wrong. I don't care, I said, and the simple honesty of it seemed to hit harder than any elaborate speech could have. You're right, Chantel. I don't care. Not anymore. Not after tonight. Not after realizing that my wife and her friends view me as entertainment rather than a human being. You want me to care about her feelings? Where was the concern for mine when you were all in that guest room planning this? The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences. This one was heavy with realization, with understanding, with the slow, dawning comprehension that maybe they'd pushed someone too far, and now they were watching the consequences unfold in real time. Several people were nodding slightly, putting pieces together, probably running through the evening in their minds and seeing it from a different angle. This wasn't supposed to happen, Brooke said weakly, more to herself than anyone else. This was supposed to be fun, light, a joke. She looked around at the wreckage of the party, at the crying bride, at the guests who'd gone from excited to traumatized, at the birthday girl who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. How did this go so wrong? You planned someone's humiliation and expected them to laugh about it, Marcus said, speaking up for the first time. His voice was calm, measured, but it cut through the room like a cleaver. That's how it went wrong. You thought you could play with someone's emotions as a party trick, and you didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't appreciate it. He looked at me and raised his glass in a subtle salute. Good for you, man. Seriously. Camilla's legs seemed to give out, and she sank onto the nearest couch, her head in her hands. The picture of devastation. The wronged woman. The misunderstood wife. Except we all knew better now. The curtain had been pulled back, and the wizard was just a person with a microphone and too much audacity. I can't believe this is happening, she said through her hands. I can't believe you're doing this to me. To you. I repeated, and the laugh that came out was genuinely amused. Even now, even after everything, it's about what I'm doing to you. Not about what you did. Not about the plan. Not about the casual cruelty. Just about poor Camilla, the victim of her husband's unreasonable reaction to being used as a prop. I shook my head slowly. That's the problem right there. That's always been the problem. I turned back toward the door, and this time I meant it. This time I was actually leaving. No more dramatic pauses. No more speeches. No more giving them chances to make this worse. Enjoy the rest of the party, everyone, I said over my shoulder. Sorry to be a buzzkill on your entertainment for the evening. Feel free to discuss this at your next brunch. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say. Daniel. Camilla screamed, actually screamed, like someone was physically harming her. You can't just walk out. You can't leave me like this. What am I supposed to do? I paused at the threshold, 1 foot already in the hallway. Freedom so close I could taste it. Figure it out, I said simply. You're a strong, independent woman, right? That's what you're always telling people. So be that. Figure out your own life without using me as a security blanket you can publicly mock. And then, because I couldn't resist one final observation. Oh, and maybe get better friends. These ones are toxic. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I didn't slam it. That was important. Slamming doors is what people do when they're still emotionally invested, when they still care enough to make noise. Quiet closing is what you do when you're genuinely done. When you've reached that place of such complete detachment that even the satisfaction of a dramatic exit isn't worth the energy. I woke up on Marcus's couch at approximately 6:47 a.m. to the sound of my phone vibrating so aggressively it was doing a little dance across his coffee table. The thing sounded like an angry bee trapped in a tin can, and for a moment, in that blissful space between sleep and consciousness, I forgot why I was on a couch that smelled faintly of expensive leather and cheaper beer. Then reality came flooding back like ice water to the face, and I remembered. I'd walked out on my wife at a party in front of 30 witnesses after she'd tried to fake dump me for entertainment purposes. Right. That happened. The phone was still buzzing. I reached for it with one hand while using the other to rub the sleep from my eyes, and when I looked at the screen, I had to blink several times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. 43 notifications. 43. I'd been asleep for maybe 6 hours, and in that time, my phone had apparently become ground zero for an emotional breakdown transmitted via text message. Every single notification was from Camilla, and they were time-stamped in a way that told a very specific story about her journey through the 5 stages of grief, minus the acceptance part. The first text had come through at 11:34 p.m., roughly 20 minutes after I'd left the party. Daniel, where did you go? People are asking about you. Classic Camilla, worried about appearances first, actual problems second. What would people think if the husband just disappeared? How would she explain that to her friends? Never mind the whole fake breakup disaster. The real crisis was managing the optics. 11:47 p.m. This is ridiculous. You're being childish. Come back so we can talk like adults. Ah yes, because nothing says adult conversation like staging a public humiliation prank. The irony was so thick you could build a house with it. 12:03 a.m. I was joking. It was a joke. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? There it was, the classic abuser's defense. It was just a joke. Why can't you take a joke? You're too sensitive. Never mind that jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone involved, not just the person making them at someone else's expense. I sat up on the couch, my back protesting the awkward sleeping position, and kept scrolling. This was better than morning coffee for waking up. Every text was a little window into Camilla's mental state as the night had progressed, and I hadn't responded. It was like watching a real-time documentary about what happens when someone who's used to getting their way suddenly doesn't. 12:31 a.m. You're overreacting. Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? Everyone is asking where you went, and I don't know what to tell them. Notice how it was embarrassing for her, not for me, the person who was supposed to be the victim of her little prank. Notice how her concern was explaining my absence, not examining why I left in the first place. Self-awareness had left the building, and it wasn't coming back anytime soon. 1:15 a.m. I can't believe you just left me. At my best friend's birthday party. What kind of husband does that? The kind of husband who's tired of being treated like a prop. Camilla. That's what kind. But sure, let's focus on the social faux pas of leaving a party rather than the emotional manipulation that preceded it. 1:44 a.m. Fine. Don't answer. Be that way. I don't need you anyway. We'd reached the anger stage. This was always fun, watching someone try to convince themselves they don't need something while simultaneously texting them repeatedly. It's like watching someone say they're not hungry while eating an entire pizza. 2:18 a.m. You know what? You're right. This marriage isn't working. You're too sensitive, too boring, too ordinary. I deserve better than this. And there it was, the lashing out, trying to hurt me the way she felt hurt. Except the words bounced off like rubber bullets off a tank. When someone shows you who they really are, insults lose their power because you already know the truth. 2:47 a.m. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. Please come home. We need to talk. Oh look, bargaining. Right on schedule. It's almost impressive how predictable people are when they're spiraling. You could set a watch by the stages of a narcissist's breakdown. 3:23 a.m. Daniel, seriously, where are you? Are you safe? I'm worried about you. Now we'd moved to concerned trolling, pretending this was about my safety rather than her need for control. I wondered if she'd actually convinced herself she was worried, or if she knew she was just trying a different tactic. Marcus emerged from his bedroom looking like he'd been awoken by the same buzzing sound, his hair sticking up at odd angles and his eyes still half closed. Dude, he mumbled, shuffling toward his kitchen. Is your phone having a seizure, or is that just my hangover making me hear things? He opened his fridge and pulled out orange juice, drinking directly from the carton like a true bachelor. Camilla's texting me, I said, still scrolling through the digital novel she'd written during the night. Apparently she has thoughts. Many, many thoughts. How many thoughts we talking? Marcus asked, now slightly more awake and definitely more interested. He came over and peered at my phone screen, letting out a low whistle when he saw the sheer number of messages. Jesus Christ, man. That's a dissertation. That's more words than my senior thesis. 4:01 a.m. You're cruel. You know that. You're a cruel person. I can't believe I married someone so heartless. We'd circled back to anger, apparently. The stages weren't linear. They were more like a drunk person wandering through a maze, hitting the same walls repeatedly. 4:33 a.m. Everyone thinks you're wrong. Tiffany said you were horrible. Brooke said you need therapy. Chantel said you're emotionally abusive. Yes, the appeal to authority. My wife's terrible friends, the same ones who'd helped her plan my humiliation, thought I was the bad guy. What a shocking development. I'm sure their opinions were totally objective and not at all influenced by their own involvement in the disaster. 5:12 a.m. Please. I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Why are you being so unforgiving? Because forgiveness requires change, Camilla. And you can't change if you don't think you did anything wrong. But I didn't text that back. I didn't text anything back. Radio silence was my new best friend. 5:47 a.m. I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you and I don't want to lose you. Please, let's fix this. And there it was, the final stage, bargaining disguised as vulnerability. The I love you that comes out only when someone realizes they might actually face consequences for their actions. Love as a tool, love as manipulation, love as a get-out-of-jail-free card. 6:23 a.m. Just tell me you're okay. You don't have to come home. Just let me know you're alive. Back to concerned trolling, because when nothing else works, pretend this is about basic human decency rather than control. Marcus had settled into his armchair with his orange juice, watching me read through the messages like it was the most entertaining Netflix series he'd seen all year. "So," he said, taking a long sip, "what are you going to text back?" He had that look on his face, the one that said he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Thought about all the ways I could respond. Could write a long explanation of why her behavior was unacceptable. Could match her energy and fire back angry texts. Could be mature and suggest counseling. Could write nothing and let the silence speak for itself. All of these were options, and all of them had their merits. But in the end, I went with simplicity. Sometimes the shortest responses cut the deepest, not because they're cruel, but because they're honest in a way that can't be argued with or twisted. I typed out one line, read it over twice to make sure it said exactly what I wanted it to say, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. "Sorry, busy enjoying my freedom." 6 words. That's all it took. 6 words that said everything I needed to say. "I'm not coming back. I'm not engaging with your drama. I'm not playing this game anymore. And most importantly, I'm doing better without you than I ever did with you." The beauty of it was in its simplicity, its finality, its complete lack of anger or emotion. It wasn't mean, it wasn't kind, it was just true. I hit send and immediately set my phone to do not disturb. Whatever Camilla sent back, and I knew there would be more, could wait. Or it could not wait. It could cease to exist in a digital void for all I cared. For the first time in years, maybe ever, her feelings were not my responsibility to manage. Her crisis was not mine to solve. Her breakdown was not mine to fix. And holy hell, did that feel good. Marcus started laughing, that genuine belly laugh that comes from witnessing something tragically perfect. "Dude," he said, wiping his eyes, "that's cold. That's like Arctic-level cold. I'm actually impressed." He raised his orange juice carton and a toast. "To freedom, I guess? And to not putting up with toxic people just because you married them." "To freedom," I agreed, and even though I didn't have a drink to toast with, the sentiment landed. I stood up, stretched out my back that was definitely going to make me pay for sleeping on a couch at my age, and looked around Marcus's apartment. It wasn't much, a typical bachelor pad with mismatched furniture and a distinct lack of decorative pillows, but it felt more like home than my actual home had in months. Because home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. And I hadn't felt at home in that expensive loft with my wife and her terrible friends in longer than I wanted to admit. My phone was still on the coffee table, face down, definitely vibrating with new messages that I had zero intention of reading. Let Camilla spiral. Let her friends try to piece together what happened. Let the entire social circle dissect my actions and judge me if they wanted. I'd learned something important last night. The opinion of people who would orchestrate your humiliation for entertainment wasn't worth the air it took to voice it. I walked to Marcus's window and looked out at the city waking up. The sun was just starting to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and somewhere out there, coffee shops were opening, people were starting their commutes, and life was happening like it always did. My marriage was over, or at least it was heading that direction fast, and weirdly, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like I'd been carrying around a weight I didn't realize was there until I finally set it down. "So what's the plan?" Marcus asked from behind me. "You gonna get a lawyer? Find a new place? Key her car." That last one was clearly a joke, but his tone said he'd support me either way. "I'm going to get coffee," I said, turning back to face him with the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Really good coffee. The expensive kind Camilla always said was a waste of money. And then I'm going to figure out the rest of my life, one decision at a time, without anyone telling me my choices aren't good enough. I grabbed my jacket from where I'd thrown it last night. "You want anything?" "Nah, man, I'm good," Marcus said, settling deeper into his chair. "But hey, Daniel, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Last night, this morning, all of it. That took balls." "Thanks," I said, meaning it. "And thanks for the couch. And for not asking too many questions." "Anytime," he replied. "That's what friends are for. Real friends. Not the kind who help orchestrate public humiliations." I left his apartment with my phone still on Do Not Disturb, my coffee fund intact, and my conscience clear. The morning after had turned into the morning of something new. And whatever came next, at least I'd be facing it as myself, not as someone's supporting character. Word spread through Camilla's social circle faster than a celebrity scandal on Twitter. Within a week, I'd become either a legend or a villain, depending on who you asked, and the friend group that had once been so tight-knit was fracturing like cheap glass under pressure. Marcus kept me updated on the gossip, partly because he found it hilarious and partly because he thought I deserved to know my exit had caused a social earthquake. Apparently, half the people at the party thought Camilla's stunt was distasteful at best and psychotic at worst. The other half were trying to defend her while simultaneously distancing themselves from the disaster. Nobody wanted to be associated with the mean girls who'd gotten called out in front of 30 witnesses. Brooke's boyfriend, a guy named Justin I'd met once or twice, actually tracked me down at a coffee shop. "Man," he said, sliding into the seat across from me without invitation. "The way you handled that? Legendary. Seriously, my girlfriend's been quiet for days. She keeps asking me if I'd walk out on her, and honestly, after seeing what you dealt with, I'm reconsidering some things." He bought me a coffee and left looking thoughtful, probably running through his own relationship in his head. Tiffany's birthday party had become infamous for all the wrong reasons. People weren't talking about the champagne tower or the expensive decorations. They were talking about the husband who called his wife's bluff and walked away without looking back. Some people respected it. Others thought I was cold. But everyone was talking about it, which meant Camilla's carefully curated image was crumbling. The best part? Camilla tried to explain it away as a social experiment to anyone who'd listen. Sure, and my bank account is a charity fund. But the story had already spread too far, and too many people knew the truth. Her friends started canceling brunch plans. Tiffany stopped posting pictures with her. Even Chantel, the most loyal of the group, was reportedly keeping her distance. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. New apartment, new routine, new peace. I'd forgotten what it felt like to make decisions without someone correcting them, to exist without being someone's accessory. Camilla had done me a favor, really. She'd shown me exactly who she was, and I'd finally believed her. 3 months after the party that destroyed my marriage and Camilla's social standing, I was living a life I'd forgotten was possible. New apartment with windows that actually let in sunlight, new haircut that didn't require Camilla's approval, and most importantly, new peace that money genuinely couldn't buy. The kind of peace that comes from not walking on eggshells in your own life. Camilla sent one final email that I almost didn't open. "I miss us." 2 words that would have wrecked me 6 months ago. Now they just made me tired. I replied with 3. "I miss being right." Then I blocked her email address and went back to my coffee. The divorce papers came and went with surprisingly little drama. Turns out when you've already had your public meltdown at a birthday party, the legal stuff feels like a formality. She kept the apartment and the designer furniture. I kept my sanity and my self-respect. Fair trade, honestly. That's when I met Nora. She was a graphic designer who laughed at inappropriate times and had opinions about everything from politics to pizza toppings. Most importantly, she didn't need an audience to validate her existence. Our first date was coffee and a walk through the park, no performance, no pretense, just 2 people talking like humans instead of Instagram characters. When I told her the story about Camilla's fake breakup prank, she laughed so hard she snorted coffee. "Wait, so basically she held a talent show for narcissists and lost?" she said, wiping tears from her eyes. That's when I knew she got it. She understood that the whole situation wasn't just about a failed prank. It was about people treating relationships like content for their personal reality show. I learned 2 critical things from that entire disaster. Never waste energy arguing with people who are performing for applause. Their opinions aren't about you. They're about maintaining their audience. And second, the best revenge isn't plotting or scheming or getting even. It's building a life so good that your past becomes irrelevant. Camilla staged a breakup for entertainment. I gave her an ending she didn't rehearse, one where the supporting character walked off set and built his own show. Turns out, freedom tastes better than any champagne her friends could have served. And peace? Peace is the real luxury item money can't buy. My wife laughed. "You really think I'd ever introduce you to my rich business partners?" Right in front of her friends. "I don't want you begging them for money." She mocked. I just smiled and said, "Don't worry, you won't have to." Then I left without another word. Later that night, her best friend texted me something that made me sit up straight. "Look, I've been to some pretty awkward dinners in my life. There was that Thanksgiving where my Uncle Frank got drunk and started arguing with the gravy boat. And there was the time my college roommate brought his new girlfriend who turned out to be a hardcore vegan to a steakhouse. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the nuclear-level cringe that went down at Clarissa's corporate dinner last Tuesday night. There's classy laughter, you know, the kind you hear at wine tastings where people pretend they can taste notes of oak with a hint of pretension. And then there's my wife just publicly humiliated me in front of her entire professional network laughter. Guess which one I got to experience? If you guessed the second one, congratulations, you win absolutely nothing except the knowledge that my life occasionally resembles a really bad reality TV show that got canceled after one episode for being too depressing. We were at Marcello's, this bougie Italian place downtown where they charge you $37 for 3 raviolis arranged in what they call deconstructed art on a plate the size of a manhole cover. The lighting was that dim, romantic kind that's supposed to make everyone look mysterious, but really just makes you squint at the menu like you're decoding ancient hieroglyphics. The whole place screamed, "I have money and I need you to know about it," which, coincidentally, was exactly Clarissa's vibe for the past year and a half. This was her turf, her people, her moment to shine like the corporate goddess she'd become. My wife, Clarissa Morrison. She hyphenated because apparently Morrison alone wasn't impressive enough for LinkedIn. Loved these events. She lived for showing off her success in front of her fancy tech investor friends, the kind of people who say things like, "Let's circle back on that synergy," without a trace of irony. These were venture capitalists who probably bathed in cryptocurrency and used $100 bills as napkins. Meanwhile, I was just the digital marketing guy, which in this crowd apparently translated to unemployed but with Wi-Fi access, or possibly that charity case Clarissa keeps around for mysterious reasons, probably involving organ harvesting. I should have known something was off when she specifically requested I wear my nice blazer, the one I bought on sale at Macy's 3 years ago that she constantly side-eyed like it had personally offended her ancestors. She'd even laid it out on the bed that morning with a look that said, "Try not to embarrass me more than necessary." I'd laughed it off then. Joke's on me, literally. The dinner started normal enough. Well, normal for a gathering where people unironically discuss their stock portfolios over appetizers and measure their self-worth in Tesla shares. I was seated next to Clarissa, across from her business partner Marcus, a guy who looked like he got his personality from a corporate training video, and his wife Jennifer, who had the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes, like she was perpetually reviewing your performance in her head and finding it lacking. Then there was David Chun, another investor in Clarissa's latest venture, and his boyfriend Andre, who at least seemed somewhat human and had actually asked me a genuine question about my work earlier. I was starting to think maybe this wouldn't be a total disaster. Spoiler alert, I have terrible instincts. The conversation flowed like expensive wine, which is to say it was smooth but left a bitter aftertaste. They talked about market disruptions, seed funding rounds, and something called blockchain integration that I'm 73% sure they were just making up as they went along. I nodded along, contributed where I could, made a few jokes that actually landed. Andre laughed at my comment about growth hacking sounding like something you'd need antibiotics for. I was holding my own, thank you very much. Then Jennifer, bless her soul or curse it, I haven't decided yet, turned to Clarissa with this sparkly, wine-drunk enthusiasm and asked, "So Clarissa, is your husband joining us for the partners' dinner next month? The one at the Waldorf? It's going to be absolutely divine, and we'd love to have the whole family there." I should mention that I had no idea there was a partners' dinner. This was news to me. But sure, why would my wife mention a fancy dinner event to her own husband? That would be crazy, right? Communication in marriage? What a wild concept. The table went quiet for half a second. That pregnant pause where you know something either really good or catastrophically bad is about to happen. I looked at Clarissa, expecting her to smile and say something like, "Oh yes, we're both looking forward to it," or literally anything that acknowledged I was a human being with feelings sitting right there. Instead, she smirked. Actually smirked, like she'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it in the mirror, perfecting the exact angle of condescension. She looked at Jennifer, then did this little laugh. You know the kind, that fake, tinkling sound that wealthy women make when they're about to say something absolutely devastating but want it to sound casual, and said, with the kind of clarity that could cut glass, "You really think I'd ever introduce him to my rich business partners?" I don't want him begging them for money. Time stopped. I'm not being dramatic. Actual time stopped. The entire table went silent. Forks paused midair. Marcus's water glass froze halfway to his mouth. Even the waiter, who'd been approaching with our entrees, did this weird shuffle-stop thing like he'd walked into an invisible force field of awkwardness. Andre's eyes went wide. Jennifer's mouth formed a perfect O of shock. David actually coughed into his napkin. And me? I just sat there for exactly 2.5 seconds while my brain processed what had just happened. My wife, the woman I'd supported through 3 career changes, the woman whose hand I'd held during her father's funeral, the woman who'd moved into my apartment 2 years ago because she was between places, had just publicly announced that I was essentially a financial liability and a social embarrassment. The thing about humiliation is that it hits you in waves. First wave, shock. Second wave, hurt. Third wave, rage. But if you wait long enough, there's a fourth wave, and that's the one where you realize you have a choice. You can either crumble, make a scene, prove everyone's low expectations right, or you can do something radical. You can keep your dignity. So I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a hurt smile, but a genuine, calm, absolutely done with this nonsense smile. I set down my fork with deliberate precision, wiped my mouth with my napkin like I was in a period drama, and said in the clearest, calmest voice I could manage, "Don't worry, you won't have to." Then I stood up. The chair made that satisfying scraping sound against the marble floor. I pulled my phone from my pocket, dropped my napkin on my plate like it was a resignation letter from this entire circus of a marriage, and walked toward the exit. The whole restaurant seemed to tilt slightly, or maybe that was just my world shifting on its axis. Behind me, I heard Clarissa's voice, sharp with panic. "Babe, wait." But I was already past the host's stand, already pushing through the door into the cool night air, already breathing like a free man. If confidence were currency, that exit made me a millionaire. My actual bank account, still decidedly middle class. But my self-respect? That just got a serious deposit, with interest. 2 years of marriage, and somehow, I completely missed the memo that I'd married the CEO of Disrespect Incorporated, a Fortune 500 company specializing in gaslighting, condescension, and making your spouse feel like they're auditioning for a role they'll never get. The benefits package apparently included 0 emotional support, negative vacation days, and a severance plan that involved public humiliation at overpriced Italian restaurants. But let me back up, because Clarissa wasn't always this way. Or maybe she was, and I was just too busy being in love to notice the red flags that were basically forming a parade route right in front of my face. Love is blind, they say. In my case, love was blind, deaf, and apparently suffered from severe cognitive impairment. I met Clarissa Chun 2 years and 4 months ago at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco. I was there covering the event for one of my digital marketing clients, a startup that made an app nobody needed but everyone pretended was revolutionary. You know the type. It's like Uber, but for plants, or some nonsense like that. Clarissa was there as a junior partner at a venture capital firm, prowling the convention center in a power suit that probably cost more than my rent, looking for the next big thing to throw money at. She was brilliant, I'll give her that. The woman could analyze a business model faster than I could order coffee. Smart, bold, charismatic, and possessed with the kind of ambition that could power a small city. She was also allergic to humility, but I mistook that for confidence at the time. Rookie mistake. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence lifts you up, arrogance steps on your neck to get higher. We met at the after party, one of those networking events where everyone pretends to be casual while desperately trying to exchange business cards and LinkedIn profiles. I was at the bar, making a joke to the bartender about how the complimentary wine tasted like regret mixed with broken dreams, and she laughed. Like, actually laughed. Not that polite corporate chuckle, but a real, genuine laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "That's the most honest thing I've heard all day," she said, sliding onto the bar stool next to mine. "Everyone here is so busy bullshitting about disruption and innovation that they've forgotten how to be real people." I liked her immediately. We spent the next 3 hours talking about everything except work, music, travel, that weird phenomenon where you can never find matching socks, the conspiracy theory that pigeons are actually government drones. She loved my wit, or so she said. I loved her ambition. She had this energy, this drive that made you feel like anything was possible. She talked about changing the world, and for a brief, shining moment, I believed we could do it together. Within 2 months, she'd moved into my apartment in Brooklyn. I had a decent one-bedroom in Park Slope that I'd been renting for 3 years. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. It had character, which is New York real estate code for small and slightly falling apart, but in a charming way. I love that place. It had my beat-up leather couch that I'd found on Craigslist, my collection of vintage movie posters, my bookshelf that was definitely a fire hazard but organized exactly how I liked it. Clarissa moved in with 2 suitcases and a mission. Within a week, my leather couch was on the curb and replaced with something she called a mid-century modern statement piece that cost $3,000 and was so uncomfortable it felt like sitting on a board of directors meeting. My movie posters came down, too juvenile, and were replaced with abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas and called it genius. My bookshelf got reorganized by color instead of author because apparently, that's what visionary people do. Babe, we need to elevate our space, she'd say, holding up paint swatches with names like Ethereal Whisper and Contemplative Fog. This apartment has so much potential. We just need to unlock it. I thought she meant we, as in us, together, partners. Turns out she meant I, as in her, dictator, and I was just the guy paying half the rent on a place that no longer felt like home. But I went along with it because I thought that's what you do when you're in love. You compromise, you adapt, you let your girlfriend turn your apartment into something that belongs in an IKEA catalog. The wedding was small, just our close friends and family at City Hall, followed by dinner at this little bistro in the West Village. No big reception, no DJ playing Cupid Shuffle, just intimate and perfect. Or so I thought. Looking back, I realized Clarissa kept it small because she didn't want to mix her professional life with her personal life, which is code for, I don't want my rich friends to see that I married someone who shops at Target. Still, I believed we were equals. We had our routines, our rhythm. Saturday morning grocery runs where we'd debate the merits of different brands of pasta sauce like it was a presidential election. Wine nights on the couch. The statement piece, where we'd binge-watch cooking shows and criticize the contestants' plating techniques. Sunday morning walks through Prospect Park where we'd grab bagels and plan our future like it was this beautiful, collaborative project. I thought we had rhythm. Turns out, I was dancing solo while she was already choreographing a different number with someone else. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The warning signs were there, glowing neon and impossible to miss if I hadn't been wearing rose-colored glasses superglued to my face. She never invited me to her networking events. Not once. It's just business, she'd say with a dismissive wave whenever I'd ask if I could tag along. You'd be bored out of your mind. It's just a bunch of suits talking about market cap and equity rounds. Trust me, you're better off staying home. And like an idiot, I trusted her. I stayed home while she went to dinners, galas, weekend retreats in the Hamptons. The partners only, she'd explain, kissing me on the cheek before heading out in a dress that cost more than our monthly utilities. Spouses aren't invited to this one. It's a work thing. Yeah, a work thing. Business of the private kind, apparently. The kind of business that involves hotel rooms and matching robes and captions about synergy. But again, I'm jumping ahead. Her friends started changing too. The ones I'd met at the beginning, normal people with normal jobs who liked normal things like brunch and complaining about subway delays, slowly got phased out. Replaced by people with titles like Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Managing Director of Strategic Partnerships, which I'm pretty sure are just fancy ways of saying, I have money and need everyone to know about it. She stopped asking about my day, stopped caring about my clients, my projects, my wins. When I'd tell her about landing a new account or finishing a successful campaign, she'd nod absently while scrolling through her phone, throwing out a distracted, "That's great, babe," that had all the enthusiasm of someone reading the terms and conditions on a software update. But the worst part? I started believing her narrative about me, that my work wasn't as important as hers, that digital marketing was somehow less legitimate than venture capital, that I should be grateful she even acknowledged my existence at social events. On the rare occasions, she actually brought me along. I became smaller, quieter. I stopped talking about my achievements because they seemed insignificant compared to her latest deal or investment. I started introducing myself as Clarissa's husband before mentioning my own name. like I was an accessory to her success story rather than my own person. Looking back now, with the benefit of hindsight and a healthy dose of anger, I can see exactly what happened. I didn't marry a partner. I married someone who needed an audience, a supporting character in her one-woman show about climbing the corporate ladder while stepping on everyone beneath her designer heels. But that night at Marcello's, when she publicly announced that I was too embarrassing to introduce to her rich friends, something inside me finally snapped back into place, like a bone that had been set wrong and suddenly realigned. The fog lifted, and I could see clearly for the first time in months. I hadn't changed. She had. Or maybe she'd always been this way, and I'd just been too busy being in love to notice I was in love with an illusion. That night, after my dramatic exit from Marcello's that would have made even the most seasoned soap opera actor proud, I went back to our apartment and did what any rational adult would do in my situation. I sat on the uncomfortable $3,000 statement piece that used to be my beloved Craigslist couch, cracked open a beer, and stared at my phone like it was a crystal ball that might reveal the secrets of the universe, or at least explain what the hell had just happened to my marriage. I waited for her to text. An apology, maybe. Sorry I publicly eviscerated you in front of my entire professional network, babe, or even a simple "we need to talk" would have sufficed. Hell, at that point, I would have settled for a "you left your credit card at the restaurant" just to acknowledge that I existed and hadn't imagined the entire humiliating disaster. Nothing, just silence. The kind of silence that's louder than any argument, the kind that fills up your apartment and sits on your chest and makes you question every single decision that led you to this exact moment. My phone sat there on the coffee table. Sorry, the artisanal reclaimed wood surface piece, mocking me with its complete lack of notifications. I checked it approximately every 47 seconds like some kind of deranged lab rat hitting a button for a reward that wasn't coming. Maybe she'd texted and my phone had glitched. Maybe she'd called and somehow all the cellular towers in New York had simultaneously malfunctioned. Maybe I'd accidentally blocked her number in a fugue state. Spoiler alert, none of these things had happened. She just genuinely wasn't reaching out. Around 10:30, I started crafting mental responses to the apology text that definitely wasn't coming. I went through all the stages. The angry response where I told her exactly what I thought of her and her pretentious friends. The dignified response where I calmly explained why her behavior was unacceptable. The petty response where I just sent back a gif of someone laughing. I had a whole collection of imaginary text conversations that would never happen, which is either sad or pathetic or both. Probably both. At 11:52 p.m., just as I was seriously considering whether drinking a second beer on a Tuesday night made me an alcoholic or just appropriately traumatized, my phone finally buzzed. I lunged for it with the desperation of a man who'd been stranded on a desert island spotting a rescue plane, nearly knocking over my beer in the process. But it wasn't her. It was Leah Martinez, Clarissa's best friend since college. Well, former best friend, as I'd soon discover, because apparently even friendships have their breaking points when it comes to tolerating complete bullshit. The text was simple and ominous. Hey, you awake? You should probably call me. My stomach dropped faster than the stock market in 2008. Leah wasn't the drama type. She was calm, measured, the kind of person who actually uses coasters and returns her shopping cart to the designated area and probably flosses twice a day. If Leah was texting me at midnight with an urgent message, something was seriously wrong. Or in this case, something had been wrong for a while, and she was finally ready to blow the whistle. I called her immediately because I'm not a monster who ignores cryptic late-night texts from concerned friends, and also because at that point, I was desperate for literally any human interaction that didn't involve being humiliated. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, she said, and her voice had that quality to it, that slight crack that told me she'd been debating whether to make this call for a long time. I'm so sorry about tonight. I heard what happened. Jessica texted me. She was at the table next to yours. Of course she was. Because my humiliation needed witnesses who could spread it through the social network like wildfire. Fantastic. Yeah, well, I said, trying to sound casual and probably failing miserably. It was definitely a memorable evening. Really livened up the dinner conversation. I'm thinking of offering my services as entertainment for corporate events. Hire me to get publicly roasted by your spouse. Great icebreaker. Leah didn't laugh. That's when I knew this conversation was about to get worse. Listen, she said, and I could hear her moving around, probably pacing her apartment the way she did when she was stressed. I can't keep quiet anymore. I've been going back and forth about this for weeks, and after tonight, after hearing what she said to you. She took a deep breath. Clarissa's been seeing someone. The words hit me like a truck, except trucks are faster and probably more merciful. For a second, I couldn't process it. Seeing someone. Like seeing someone. As in romantically? As in cheating? As in the woman who'd just humiliated me for being financially beneath her had also been stepping out on our marriage? What? Was all I could manage, which wasn't my most eloquent moment, but give me a break. I was having what experts call a really bad day. Her business partner, Leah, continued, and I could hear the anger in her voice now, the frustration of someone who'd been keeping a toxic secret and was finally letting it out. His name's Elliot Shaw. You know, the guy she's always having those late-night meetings with? The one she went to that conference in Miami with last month? Yeah, it's been going on for months. Since at least January, maybe longer. January. We'd celebrated our second anniversary in February. She'd gotten me a watch, a nice one, actually, with an inscription on the back that said "Forever Yours." I was wearing it right now. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, serve it at Marcello's, and charge $40 a plate for it. I almost laughed. I mean, what else do you do when your world is imploding? The business partner. Of course it was the business partner. It was so cliché it almost wrapped back around to being creative. Next you'll tell me they fell in love during a PowerPoint presentation about quarterly projections. Elliot Shaw. I repeated, letting the name roll around in my mouth like poison. The guy from her firm? The one with the... I searched my memory for the few times she'd mentioned him. The Tesla and the stupid hair gel? That's the one, Leah confirmed. And it gets worse. Because apparently the universe had decided that tonight was the night to just pile it all on, really go for the jugular. She tells everyone you're broke and only with her for her money. That you'd embarrass her if her partners met you, which is why she never brings you around. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Embarrass her? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I wanted to go full Hulk and smash that stupid statement piece couch into kindling. But instead, I just sat there, processing the information like a computer trying to run too many programs at once. I pay half the bills, I said quietly, more to myself than to Leah. I bought my own socks this morning. I have a job. I have clients. I'm not some. I couldn't even finish the sentence because the absurdity was overwhelming. I know, Leah said gently. Everyone who actually knows you knows that. But Clarissa's been crafting this narrative, spinning this story where you're this deadweight she's stuck with out of pity or obligation or God knows what. And the people in her circle, they just eat it up because it makes for good gossip and none of them have bothered to actually meet you and form their own opinions. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture so ugly I wished I could unsee it. That's why she never invited me to events. That's why she'd reacted so strongly when Jennifer suggested I come to the partners' dinner. That's why she'd been so dismissive of my work, my accomplishments, my entire existence. She'd been rewriting our story, casting herself as the successful martyr and me as the loser husband she was too kind to dump. How long have you known? I asked, and I wasn't even mad at Leah. I was just curious, in that detached way you get when you're so far past anger you've entered some kind of emotional no man's land. About the affair? 2 months, she admitted. I saw them together at a restaurant in Soho. They didn't see me, but they were. There was no mistaking what was going on. Hand-holding, kissing, the whole 9 yards. I confronted her the next day, and she begged me not to tell you. Said she was going to end it, that it was a mistake, that she loved you and was just going through something. She paused, but she didn't end it. And after tonight, after watching her humiliate you like that, I couldn't do it anymore. You deserve to know the truth. I sat there in my too expensive, too uncomfortable apartment that no longer felt like mine, holding a phone that had just delivered news that my marriage was even more dead than I'd thought, and I felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not rage, not even surprise. I felt relief. Like someone had finally confirmed what some part of me had known all along, but had been too scared or stupid or optimistic to acknowledge. My marriage was over. Had been over for a while, probably. And now I had a choice. I could either crumble under the weight of this betrayal, or I could do something about it. Leah, I said, and my voice was steady now, clear. Thank you for telling me. I mean it. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I looked around the apartment at all of Clarissa's improvements and statement pieces and evidence of a life I'd been living for someone else's benefit. I'm going to get my life back, I said, starting tomorrow. And I meant it. The next day, I woke up with that special kind of clarity that only comes from having your entire worldview shattered and then reassembled overnight. You know that feeling when you've been looking at one of those optical illusion pictures and suddenly your brain flips and you can finally see the hidden image? Yeah, it was like that, except the hidden image was my wife's betrayal, and it was way less fun than finding the dolphin in the pattern. I wasn't sad. That would come later, probably during some random Tuesday while I was buying milk or watching a commercial with a happy couple in it. But right now, in this moment, sitting at my kitchen table with my third cup of coffee and approximately 2 hours of sleep under my belt, I wasn't sad. I was curious. Scientifically, methodically curious. I needed facts. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind and that my marriage had actually imploded in spectacular fashion. Also, I'll be honest, a small, petty part of me wanted ammunition. Not for revenge, exactly, but for protection. Because I knew Clarissa, and I knew that when cornered, she had a tendency to rewrite history faster than George Orwell's worst nightmare. By the time she was done spinning this story, I'd somehow be the villain who'd driven her into the arms of another man through my terrible crimes of being middle class and shopping at Target. So I called Troy Chin. No relation to Clarissa, thank God, though the shared last name had made for some confusing moments at parties. Troy was my buddy from college, an IT wizard who dropped out sophomore year to work for a tech startup and now made more money than all of us combined, while wearing hoodies and eating ramen for fun, not out of necessity. The man could hack into pretty much anything, though he preferred to use his powers for good, or at least for morally ambiguous situations involving helping his friends. He picked up on the third ring, sounding groggy. Dude, it's like 9 in the morning. This better be good. Did someone die? Are you dying? Is this about that weird mole again because I told you? I'm not a doctor. Clarissa's cheating on me. I interrupted, because sometimes you just need to rip the Band-Aid off. And I need your help. There was a pause. Then I heard rustling and what sounded like Troy falling out of bed. Holy shit. Okay, I'm awake now. Tell me everything. I gave him the abbreviated version. The dinner, the humiliation, Leah's phone call, the whole sordid tale of my marriage's demise. To his credit, Troy listened without interrupting, which was impressive because the man normally had the attention span of a caffeinated squirrel. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. Man, that's brutal. I never liked her, you know. Too much hairspray and ambition. Dangerous combination. He paused. So what do you need from me? You want me to hack her email? Because I will. I absolutely will. Just say the word. No, I said, because despite everything, I wasn't ready to cross into full-on illegal territory. But remember like 6 months ago when she asked me to link her business files to my iCloud? For backup purposes? I could practically hear Troy's grin through the phone. Oh, dude, are you telling me you have legal access to her cloud storage? Is it legal if she asked me to set it up? I asked, genuinely curious about the ethics here. Legal enough, Troy said, which was not exactly a ringing endorsement from a legal standpoint, but good enough for my current moral flexibility. You're not hacking anything. You're accessing files that you have legitimate credentials for. It's like she gave you a key to her house and then forgot you had it. Exactly, I said, feeling slightly better about what I was about to do. So walk me through this. How do I access everything? Troy launched into an explanation about shared drives, cloud storage, and digital footprints that was way more detailed than I needed, but which I appreciated anyway, because it made this feel more legitimate, more official. Like I was conducting an investigation rather than snooping through my cheating wife's files. Semantics matter when you're having a moral crisis. Basically, Troy summarized after 5 minutes of technical jargon. If she synced her files to your iCloud for backup, you can access them through any device logged into your account. Just go to iCloud.com, log in, and look for the shared folders. They should all be there. Photos, documents, everything she didn't specifically encrypt or hide. And she wouldn't know I'm looking? I asked, because the last thing I needed was a notification popping up on her phone that said, your husband is currently viewing evidence of your affair. Nah, you're good. It's your account. You're just accessing your own storage. She's the guest here, technically. Troy paused. This is beautiful, by the way. I mean, terrible for you, but beautiful from a digital karma perspective. She literally handed you the evidence. I thanked Troy, promised to update him later, and hung up. Then I sat there for a minute, staring at my laptop like it was Pandora's box. Once I looked, there was no going back. I'd have confirmation. Evidence. Proof that my marriage was as dead as my hopes for a peaceful resolution. But here's the thing about curiosity and betrayal. They're a hell of a combination. I opened my laptop, navigated to iCloud.com, logged in with my credentials, and there it was. A folder labeled Clarissa Work_Backup. Genius name, babe. Really encrypted that one. I clicked it open. The first thing I saw was a subfolder labeled Events, which seemed innocent enough until I opened it, and found myself staring at approximately 200 photos that definitely weren't business-related unless business had suddenly become a euphemism for affair. There they were, Clarissa and Elliot Shaw, the business partner with the stupid hair gel and the Tesla. Photos of them at fancy restaurants I'd never been to, wine glasses raised in toasts I'd never been part of. Photos at what looked like a yacht party, because of course there was a yacht, with Clarissa laughing in a way I hadn't seen her laugh in months, maybe years. Photos at hotel suites with views that probably cost more per night than my monthly salary. And then there were the really damning ones. The kind that left absolutely no room for interpretation or the "we're just colleagues" defense. Elliot's arm around her waist. Clarissa kissing his cheek. The two of them in matching white robes, hotel robes, clearly, on what appeared to be a balcony overlooking the ocean. One photo even had a caption, because apparently my wife had decided to document her affair like it was a vacation scrapbook, celebrating Synergy Red Heart. Synergy. She'd actually written Synergy. I laughed out loud, a bitter, slightly unhinged sound that echoed in my empty apartment. Yeah, Synergy. Great word for adultery. Very professional. Very business appropriate. I'm sure that'll look fantastic in the divorce proceedings. I kept scrolling, my morbid curiosity fully engaged now. There were receipts, dinner receipts, hotel receipts, receipts for jewelry that I'd never seen her wear at home. There were text message screenshots between her and Elliot, flirty and intimate and absolutely inappropriate for people who were supposedly just business partners. There were calendar entries for meetings that were clearly not meetings unless meeting was code for afternoon delight at the Mandarin Oriental. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, irrefutable, and I downloaded every single file, every photo, every receipt, every message. I created a new folder on my desktop and labeled it proof_that_karma_works_draft1, because if I didn't make jokes about this, I was going to start throwing things, and I couldn't afford to replace my laptop right now. The whole process took about 45 minutes. 45 minutes of clicking through the documented destruction of my marriage, archived and organized with the same efficiency Clarissa brought to everything she did. At least she was thorough, I'll give her that. If you're going to cheat on your husband, might as well keep meticulous records. Really commit to it. When I was done, I sat back and stared at the folder on my desktop. 2.3 gigabytes of betrayal, neatly compressed and ready for. What exactly? What was I going to do with this? Send it to her parents? Post it on social media? Confront her with a PowerPoint presentation of her affair? Really lean into the business aesthetic she loved so much? No, I was going to keep it safe, back it up in multiple locations, and use it when the time was right. Because I knew Clarissa, and I knew that she'd try to spin this, to make herself the victim, to paint me as the bad guy who'd somehow forced her into the arms of a man with better hair gel and a more impressive stock portfolio. But now I had proof. Evidence. The truth in digital form, time-stamped and geotagged and completely impossible to deny. I texted Troy. Got everything. You were right. It's beautiful in the worst possible way. He responded immediately. Screenshots or it didn't happen. JK. Well, not really JK, but I understand if you don't want to share. What's your next move? I looked around my apartment. Her apartment, really, since she'd redesigned every inch of it. I thought about the dinner, the humiliation, the months of feeling small and insignificant. I thought about Elliot Shaw and his stupid yacht and his matching robes and his synergy. I'm getting my life back, I typed, starting with my couch. Troy sent back a gif of someone setting a couch on fire, which wasn't exactly what I meant, but I appreciated the sentiment. I closed my laptop, grabbed my phone, and started making a list. First item, call the landlord. Second item, figure out how to legally evict your cheating wife from an apartment that's in your name. Third item, buy a new couch, one that's actually comfortable and doesn't cost more than a used car. The curiosity had been satisfied. The evidence had been collected. Now it was time for action. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Clarissa. Her first communication since the dinner disaster 2 nights ago. And let me tell you, the anticipation had been killing me. Would it be an apology? A confession? A heartfelt admission that she'd been a terrible human being and wanted to make amends? Nope. It was, can we talk? I think you overreacted last night. Overreacted. I read that word about 17 times, each time feeling my blood pressure tick up a few notches. I'd been publicly humiliated, discovered my wife was cheating on me, and spent the previous day downloading evidence of her affair from cloud storage like some kind of discount private investigator. But sure, I'd overreacted. Getting roasted in front of her entire professional network and then calmly walking out apparently counts as an overreaction if you leave before dessert. My bad. Should I have stayed for the tiramisu while she continued to eviscerate my character? Would that have been the appropriate response? I took a deep breath, counted to 10, then counted to 10 again because the first time didn't work, and typed back, sure. Daily Grind. 3 p.m. Daily Grind was our usual coffee shop, a hipster place in Brooklyn that served overpriced lattes with foam art and played indie music that sounded like someone gently weeping into a ukulele. We'd had our first date there, back when I thought Clarissa was the love of my life and not the future destroyer of my emotional well-being. The nostalgia felt fitting. Might as well end this relationship where it began, completing the circle of dysfunction. She agreed immediately, which told me she was either genuinely remorseful or, more likely, confident she could talk her way out of this. Clarissa had always been good with words, with crafting narratives that made her look good and everyone else look unreasonable. I'd seen her do it in business meetings, turning potential disasters into learning opportunities and failed projects into pivots. But this time, I had receipts. Literally. Hotel receipts with her name on them. I showed up at 2:55 p.m. because punctuality is a virtue, and also because I wanted to claim the good table. The one in the corner with decent lighting and a clear view of the door. Strategic positioning matters when you're about to have the conversation that ends your marriage. I ordered my usual coffee, a simple medium roast with cream, none of that oat milk, turmeric, adaptogenic mushroom nonsense that cost $8 and tasted like regret. Clarissa arrived at 3:17 p.m., 17 minutes late, which was so typical it almost made me laugh. She'd always operated on what I called Clarissa time, a flexible concept where schedules were suggestions and other people's time was less valuable than hers. She was wearing the red blazer, the one I'd bought her 3 years ago for her first big promotion at the firm. The one I'd saved up for, spent way too much money on, presented to her with genuine pride and love. Of course she'd wear that. Psychological warfare disguised as fashion choice. She slid into the chair across from me with a practiced smile, the kind she probably used on difficult clients or investors who needed convincing. Hey, she said softly, like we were old friends catching up and not a married couple whose relationship had imploded spectacularly over wine and ravioli. Hey, I replied, taking a sip of my coffee and maintaining eye contact. I'd learned from every legal drama I'd ever watched that maintaining eye contact shows confidence. Also, I wanted to see her face when I dropped the bomb. Look, she started, leaning forward with what I'm sure she thought was an earnest expression. About the other night. I was drunk and stupid, okay? Those dinners always stress me out. Everyone's always trying to one-up each other, and I had like 3 glasses of wine on an empty stomach. She reached across the table like she was going to take my hand, but I pulled back, wrapping both hands around my coffee cup instead. So your defense is that alcohol made you announce to a table full of people that I'm too embarrassing to introduce to your business partners? I asked calmly. That I'd beg them for money? That's the story we're going with. She had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. I didn't mean it like that. It came out wrong. You know how I get when I'm drinking. I say things I don't mean, and everyone at that table knows not to take me seriously when I'm being sarcastic. Clarissa, I interrupted, because I could feel her building momentum, getting ready to launch into full spin doctor mode. Who's Elliot? The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually pass out. It was almost impressive, watching someone go from confident to terrified in zero point 0.3 seconds. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish trying to figure out how to breathe on land. What? She finally managed, but her voice cracked on that single syllable. I pulled out my phone. Bless you, smartphone technology, and slowly, deliberately slid it across the table. On the screen was one of my favorite photos from her cloud backup. Clarissa and Elliot on what appeared to be a yacht, his arm around her waist, both of them wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly insurance payment, with the caption "Celebrating Synergy Red Heart" displayed in all its ironic glory. Elliot Shaw, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. Your business partner. The guy you've been having late-night meetings with. The one you went to Miami with last month for that conference that apparently involved matching hotel robes and oceanfront balconies. Ring any bells? She stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake that had suddenly appeared on the table. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it, then thought better of it and pulled back. It's not what it looks like, she whispered, which has to be the most cliché response in the history of infidelity. Like, come on. You couldn't even be original in your denial? Really? I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling more relaxed than I had in days. There's something liberating about finally having the upper hand in a conversation. Because what it looks like is two people celebrating synergy in matching robes at a hotel. Which, by the way, is a fascinating choice of words. Synergy. Very professional. Very business appropriate. I especially enjoyed that one, along with the approximately 199 other photos documenting your affair. How did you? She started, then stopped, realization dawning. The cloud backup. The cloud backup you asked me to set up 6 months ago, I confirmed. Really thoughtful of you, actually. Saved me the trouble of hiring a private investigator. Though I have to say, your organizational system is excellent. Very thorough documentation. Really committed to the project. She opened her mouth, closed it, and I watched her cycle through about 15 different expressions: shock, anger, fear, calculation, before landing on tears. Actual tears, streaming down her face, her mascara starting to run in those dramatic lines that probably looked artistic in movies, but just looked desperate in a coffee shop at 3:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, and her voice had that quiver that I'd fallen for so many times before. The vulnerability, the raw emotion. But this time, I could see the performance in it. The calculated choice to cry, to play the victim, to make this about her pain instead of her choices. Oh, I'm not hurt, I said, and it was only partially a lie. Sure, there was hurt buried somewhere under the anger and betrayal and bitter satisfaction, but right now, in this moment, I felt something better. I felt motivated, energized, free. You're not. She looked up, confused, like this wasn't going according to her script. Nope. I took another sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. I mean, don't get me wrong. Finding out your wife has been cheating on you for months while telling everyone you're a broke embarrassment definitely stings. But you know what hurt more? Believing I wasn't good enough. Believing your narrative about me being less than. Shrinking myself to fit into your story. That's not. I never meant, she tried, but I held up a hand. You did. You absolutely did. And the crazy thing is, I let you. I bought into it. But that dinner? That beautiful, catastrophic disaster of a dinner where you humiliated me in front of everyone? That was the best thing you could have done for me. Because it woke me up. I stood up, leaving my half-finished coffee on the table. Some exits require full dramatic effect. So thank you, actually. Thank you for being so spectacularly awful that I finally saw clearly. Thank you for being careless enough to back up your affair photos to my cloud storage. And thank you for wearing that red blazer today. Really brings back memories of when I thought you were someone worth loving. Wait, she said, standing up too, reaching for my arm. Where are you going? We need to talk about this. We can work through this. I gently pulled my arm away. No, we really can't. Because here's the thing, Clarissa, I'm done. Done apologizing for not being rich enough, successful enough, impressive enough for you. Done pretending your disrespect was just your personality. Done being married to someone who values me less than her stock portfolio. You can't just leave, she said, and now the tears were gone, replaced by anger. There it was, the real Clarissa. We're married. You can't just walk away. Watch me, I said. Oh, and by the way, pack your stuff. You've got until Friday. Her eyes widened. You can't kick me out of our apartment. Actually, I can. Lease is in my name. Always has been. You moved into my place, remember? Before you redecorated it into something from a lifestyle magazine nobody actually reads. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. One more thing. Elliot might want to know you're married. I hear transparency is important in business partnerships. And with that, I walked out of Daily Grind, leaving Clarissa standing there speechless for probably the first time in her life. The bell above the door chimed as I left, and I swear it sounded like applause. I'd already talked to our landlord that morning, before the coffee shop confrontation, because I'm a planner and also because I wanted to make sure I wasn't about to commit some kind of illegal eviction that would land me in housing court explaining to a judge why I'd kicked out my cheating wife. Turns out, when the lease is entirely in your name and your spouse isn't on any official documentation, you have significantly more power than you'd think. Who knew? Well, Mr. Kowalski knew. Our landlord, a 60-something Polish guy who'd seen enough tenant drama in his 40 years of property management to write a book about it. Your wife, he'd said over the phone, his thick accent making the word wife sound like an accusation. She is not on lease. Never has been. I remember when she moved in, you tell me is temporary, maybe 6 months. That was 2 years ago. He paused. She is trouble, yes? I can tell. Too many shoes in hallway. Nobody needs that many shoes. I'd laughed despite everything because he was right. Clarissa had approximately 400 pairs of shoes, give or take, most of which lived in our hallway closet like some kind of expensive leather army. Yeah, Mr. Kowalski. She's trouble. I need to know what my options are if I want her to move out. You give notice, he'd said simply. 30 days is nice, but not required if she is not on lease. Technically, she is guest. Very expensive guest with too many shoes, but still guest. You tell her to leave, she leaves. She makes problem, you call police for trespassing. Is your apartment, your name, your rent, your rules. Armed with this information and a newfound sense of legal righteousness, I'd met Clarissa at the coffee shop and dropped the eviction bomb. The look on her face when I told her to pack up by Friday had been worth every uncomfortable conversation that was sure to follow. She tried calling me approximately 47 times after I left Daily Grind. I ignored all of them. She'd texted me another 36 times, ranging from angry, "You can't do this," to desperate, "Please, can we just talk like adults?" to manipulative, "I'm having a panic attack, I need you." I responded to exactly one message, the one where she claimed she had nowhere to go. That's not my problem. You have until Friday at 6 p.m. After that, your stuff goes to storage and the locks get changed. Was I being harsh? Maybe. But you know what's also harsh? Cheating on your spouse for months, humiliating them publicly, and then expecting them to just roll over and take it because you've decided to cry about consequences. Thursday morning, Leah texted me. Clarissa called me crying. Asked me to help her pack. I said yes because honestly, I want to make sure she actually leaves. That okay? More than okay, I replied. Thank you. Seriously. No problem, she wrote back. I've been wanting to tell her off for months. This gives me an excuse to do it while being helpful. Win-win. I decided to stay at Troy's place for those 3 days, partly because I didn't want to be there during the packing process and partly because I didn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. Also, Troy had a PlayStation 5 and a collection of craft beers that seemed appropriate for processing the end of a marriage. Dude, you're handling this way better than I would, Troy said on Wednesday night, as we played some zombie survival game that felt oddly therapeutic. If I found out my wife was cheating, I'd probably set all her stuff on fire and post the video on YouTube. Tempting, I admitted, but arson seems like it would complicate the divorce proceedings. Fair point, he said, shooting a virtual zombie in the head. Still, you're being very mature about this. It's actually kind of disturbing. When's the breakdown happening? I want to be prepared. Should I buy tissues? Ice cream? A punching bag? I'm not going to break down, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. I'm just done, you know? Like, completely done. She killed any feelings I had left the moment she said I'd embarrass her in front of her rich friends. Troy paused the game and looked at me. You know what? Good. She's trash. Expensive, well-dressed trash, but trash nonetheless. You deserve someone who doesn't make you feel like you're not enough. Thanks, man, I said, genuinely touched by the sentiment, even though Troy had the emotional intelligence of a golden retriever most of the time. Friday arrived with all the anticipation of Christmas morning, except instead of presents, I was getting my apartment back. Leah had been texting me updates throughout the day like a play-by-play sports commentator. 10 a.m. We've started packing. She's crying over photo albums. I told her she should have thought about memories before making new ones with Elliot. She's not speaking to me now. 12 p.m. She wants to take the couch. I told her absolutely not. That's your couch. She just replaced it. She's arguing that she paid for it. I said, cool. Take the receipt and the couch can meet her at her new place. She's pouting. 2 p.m. The couch is staying. Victory. Also, did you know she has like 8 different face cream moisturizers? 8. Each costs more than my car payment. No wonder she needs a rich boyfriend. 4 p.m. We're almost done. She keeps asking where you are. I keep telling her it's none of her business. She tried to take your coffee maker. I physically removed it from her hands. You're welcome. 5:30 p.m. Everything's packed. She's sitting on the floor crying. I feel bad for like 2 seconds. Then I remember the dinner incident, and I'm over it. Should I wait with her until 6 or can I leave? I texted back. You can leave. Thank you for everything. I owe you dinner, drinks, and possibly a kidney. Just dinner is fine, she replied. Maybe drinks. Definitely not a kidney. See you later. At 6:15 p.m., I got a text from Clarissa. I'm gone. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I finished my beer, said goodbye to Troy, and drove back to my apartment. My apartment, not ours, not hers, mine, with a mixture of excitement and dread that felt like the emotional equivalent of drinking expired milk. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was empty. Well, not completely empty, but significantly emptier than it had been 3 days ago. The statement piece couch was still there, thank God. I'd meant what I said about it being uncomfortable, but it was mine now, and I could sell it or donate it or turn it into firewood if I wanted. Her abstract art was gone from the walls, leaving behind rectangular shadows where the paint had faded around the frames. Her shoes were gone from the hallway. All 400 pairs, apparently transported to wherever she'd decided to land. The bedroom was the strangest. Half the closet was empty, just bare hangers swaying slightly in the air-conditioning breeze. Her nightstand was cleared off. No more bottles of expensive face cream. No more self-help books about manifesting success. No more charging cables for her 17 different devices. The bathroom had been similarly purged of her presence. No more hair products covering every available surface. No more makeup bags exploding across the counter. No more contact lens solution taking up prime real estate. It was like she'd been erased, carefully removed from my life with surgical precision. And you know what? It felt good. Really good. Like I'd been living in someone else's home for 2 years and finally gotten my space back. I walked around slowly, taking inventory. She'd left the dishes, probably because they were cheap and from Target, not up to her standards. She'd left most of the furniture because, again, not expensive enough to bother with. She'd taken all the fancy kitchen gadgets she'd bought. The espresso machine I'd never learned to use, the stand mixer that had made exactly 3 batches of cookies, the immersion blender that had seemed important at the time, but had spent 2 years and used in a drawer. On the kitchen counter, I found a note. Of course there was a note. This was Clarissa. Everything had to be dramatic, had to have the last word. I picked it up, expecting some final manipulation, some last-ditch effort to make me feel guilty. Instead, it just said, the spare key is on the counter. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Whatever I was looking for. I almost laughed. I wasn't looking for anything. I'd found something. Self-respect, clarity, freedom. But sure, Clarissa, make this about me searching for something, as if I was the one who'd lost my way. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash, which was oddly satisfying. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Troy. She's gone. Place is empty. I'm free. He responded immediately. Hell yeah? Want to celebrate? I'm thinking burgers and beer. My treat. Rain check. I texted back. Tonight, I just want to sit in my apartment and enjoy the silence. And that's exactly what I did. I ordered pizza. Not fancy pizza from that artisanal place Clarissa loved, but cheap, greasy, absolutely perfect pizza from the corner spot that delivered in 20 minutes. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, one of the cheap ones I'd been too embarrassed to drink when she was around because she'd made some comment about craft over quantity. I sat on the uncomfortable $3,000 statement piece couch, put my feet up on the coffee table without worrying about water rings, and watched whatever I wanted on TV without someone critiquing my choices. It was the best Friday night I'd had in 2 years. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Leah, how are you doing? Need company?" "I'm good," I wrote back honestly. "Really, genuinely good. Thank you for everything you did. Seriously, you're a lifesaver." "That's what friends do," she replied. "Also, for what it's worth, I think you handled this whole thing with way more grace than she deserved. Proud of you." I smiled at my phone, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the beer. "Thanks. That means a lot." Later, as I was getting ready for bed in my half-empty bedroom, I realized something. The apartment didn't feel empty. It felt clean, purged, like I'd finally removed an infection I hadn't even known was there. All of Clarissa's improvements, her statement pieces, her vision for our space, none of it had ever been about us. It had always been about her, about creating an environment that reflected her status and success, with me as an accessory that didn't quite match the aesthetic. Now I could rebuild, make this place actually mine, fill it with things I liked, not things I was told I should like. Maybe get my old couch back from wherever it ended up. Hang posters that made me happy instead of art that was supposed to impress people. 2 weeks after Clarissa's dramatic exit from my life and my apartment, I'd settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Work during the day, gym in the evening. I joined one, partly for health and partly because angry exercising is surprisingly therapeutic, and Netflix at night without anyone judging my taste in shows. I'd even bought a new couch, nothing fancy, just comfortable and decidedly not a statement piece. It was glorious. I was sleeping better, eating better, and generally existing better without the constant low-level stress of being married to someone who thought I was an embarrassment. I was in the middle of a particularly satisfying morning. Coffee, bagel, answering emails in my pajamas because working from home has its perks, when my phone buzzed with a text from Leah. The preview made me actually laugh out loud, which scared my neighbor's cat that had been lounging on my fire escape. "You sitting down?" the text read. I wasn't sitting down, but I immediately sat down, because when someone asks if you're sitting down before delivering news, it's either going to be spectacularly good or catastrophically bad, and given recent events, I was due for some good news. The universe owed me at least that much. I texted back, "I am now. Hit me." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Leah was crafting this message carefully, which meant it was going to be good. Finally, the text came through, and it was beautiful. Elliot dumped her. Publicly. At a gala. Last night. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Elliot, Mr. Synergy himself, the business partner with the Tesla and the stupid hair gel and the yacht photos, had dumped Clarissa. Not just dumped her, but publicly. At a gala. Which meant witnesses, lots of them. Probably the same crowd that had watched her humiliate me at Marcello's. Karma wasn't just real, it was working overtime and apparently had a flair for poetic justice. Details, I texted back in all caps because the situation demanded emphasis. I need details. All of them. Spare nothing. Leah called instead of texting, because some stories are too good to type out. "Oh my God," she said the moment I picked up, and I could hear the barely contained glee in her voice. "Where do I even start?" "Okay, so you know the Tech Innovation Gala? The one she's been talking about for months. The one she didn't invite me to because I'd embarrass her?" I asked, unable to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "That's the one," Leah confirmed. So apparently, Elliot had no idea she was married. Like, actually no idea. She'd been telling him you were her assistant. Her assistant? Can you believe that? She told him you worked for her, handled her schedule, did her errands, whatever. Basically painted you as her employee. I laughed so hard I actually snorted, which was not attractive but was absolutely justified. Her assistant? Did I at least get a promotion before the breakup? Was I senior assistant? Executive assistant? Assistant to the regional manager? Leah was laughing too now. I don't know what your title was in her fantasy world, but get this. Elliot found out the truth. Someone at the gala, I don't know who, mentioned that Clarissa's husband had finally wised up and left her. Used those exact words, apparently. Elliot was confused, asked what they meant, and boom, the whole story came out. Multiple people told him she was married, had been married for 2 years, and that her assistant was actually her husband who'd recently kicked her out. "Oh, this is beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "This is the most beautiful thing I've heard in my entire life." What did he do? He confronted her right there in the middle of the gala, in front of everyone. Called her a liar and a fraud. Said he didn't associate with people who had no integrity. Then he walked away, and she tried to follow him. And he literally told her, and I quote because Jessica was there and heard the whole thing, "Don't contact me again. My lawyers will be in touch about dissolving our business partnership." I had to put the phone down for a second because I was laughing too hard to breathe. When I picked it back up, Leah was still talking, clearly on a roll. And then she tried to play it off like it was a misunderstanding, but nobody was buying it. Everyone there knew what had happened at your dinner, knew you'd left her, and now they knew why. Jessica said people were literally turning away from her when she tried to talk to them. She ended up leaving after like 20 minutes, and apparently she was crying in the bathroom before she left. Full mascara running, ugly crying meltdown. "Stop," I said, though I absolutely did not want her to stop. I can only handle so much joy at once. My heart might explode. "Oh, but wait, there's more," Leah continued, and I could picture her grinning. She tried to move back to her parents' house. You know, her mom and dad who live in that nice place in Connecticut. "I remember them," I said. Clarissa's parents had always been kind to me, surprisingly down-to-earth people who seemed confused about how they'd raised such an ambitious, status-obsessed daughter. Her dad was a retired teacher. Her mom was a librarian. Good people. Salt-of-the-earth types. Her mom kicked her out, Leah said with obvious satisfaction. Told her she was disappointed in her, that she'd raised her better than this, and that she needed to figure out her life before coming home. Her dad apparently didn't even argue, just backed up her mom. They adored you, by the way. Thought you were the grounded one, the good influence. Her mom literally said, you had a good man, and you threw him away for what? Money? Status? Shame on you. I felt an unexpected warmth in my chest. I'd always liked Clarissa's parents, had felt guilty about how the divorce would affect my relationship with them. Knowing they saw through her nonsense, that they'd sided with basic human decency over their own daughter's terrible choices, somehow made everything feel more validated. Where is she now? I asked, genuinely curious. Last I heard, she's staying with her college roommate in Manhattan. Some tiny studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen. Going from your nice Brooklyn place to a studio in Hell's Kitchen has got to sting. Oh, and Jessica also said she's been posting cryptic quotes on Instagram. You know the type. You never know the value of water till the well runs dry, and sometimes the person you'd take a bullet for is the one behind the trigger. Real deep, profound stuff. Honey, I was the whole water supply, I said, feeling philosophical. The well, the pump, the plumbing, and the guy who paid the water bill. But sure, post your little quotes. Very healing. Leah laughed. I love how you're handling this. Most people would be gloating harder. Oh, I'm gloating, I assured her. I'm just doing it with style. There's a difference between satisfaction and being petty. I'm going for satisfaction. Well, you've earned it, she said. Seriously, after everything she put you through, you deserve to enjoy this moment. Karma came through. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, processing everything. Elliot had dumped her. Her parents had rejected her. She'd gone from penthouse dreams to studio apartment reality in the span of 2 weeks. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the truth underneath. That she was someone who valued appearances over authenticity, status over substance, and had burned every genuine relationship in pursuit of something that was never real to begin with. And me? I was sitting in my apartment, comfortable and free, with real friends who actually cared about me, no longer twisting myself into knots trying to be someone I wasn't. I'd lost a wife, but gained my self-respect back. That seemed like a pretty good trade. I pulled up Instagram out of curiosity. I know. I should have had more self-control, and sure enough, there were the cryptic quotes. You never know the value of water till the well runs dry. Posted 2 days ago with a black and white filter that was probably supposed to be artistic, but just looked sad. The comments were mostly emojis and generic "Stay Strong Queen" messages from people who clearly didn't know the full story. I didn't like or comment. Didn't even screenshot it to send to Troy, though he would have appreciated it. I just looked at it for a moment, this digital monument to someone who'd learned consequences the hard way, and then I closed the app. There was something Clarissa had never understood, something that all her ambition and status chasing had blinded her to. Real wealth isn't about money or connections or impressing people at galas. It's about integrity. About having people in your life who know the real you and stick around anyway. About being able to look at yourself in the mirror and like what you see. By those metrics, I was rich. Not billionaire rich, not yacht party rich, but genuinely, meaningfully wealthy in the ways that actually mattered. And Clarissa? She was bankrupt. I texted Troy. Heard about Clarissa's epic downfall. Karma came through. He responded with a gif of someone popping champagne, followed by, "Justice. Want to celebrate? Drinks on me. Thanks, but I'm good." I typed back. Already celebrating in my own way. Mostly just enjoying the peace. "That's probably healthier than my celebration plans," he admitted. "But the offer stands whenever you're ready." I looked around my apartment, my actual apartment now, filled with my stuff, decorated how I wanted, peaceful and comfortable in mine. I thought about Clarissa in her studio in Hell's Kitchen, probably staring at her phone waiting for Elliot to text her back, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The thing about being grounded, the quality her parents had appreciated in me, is that when everything falls apart, you don't fall far. You're already on solid ground. But when you build your entire life on a foundation of appearances and lies and status, when everything is about climbing higher and looking down on people beneath you, the fall is spectacular. And I had a front row seat to watch it happen. Grounded, yes. As in not flying on private jets to hotel suites, not measuring my worth by my stock portfolio, not sacrificing my integrity for a seat at the table with rich people who'd forget my name 5 minutes after meeting me. I was grounded, and I'd never been more grateful for solid ground in my entire life. Revenge wasn't sweet, it was peaceful. That's what I realized in the weeks following Clarissa's spectacular implosion. I'd expected to feel vindicated, maybe even a little smug about karma finally catching up with her. Instead, I just felt calm. Like the universe had balanced its books, and I could finally move on without looking over my shoulder. I deleted her number from my phone during a particularly boring Tuesday afternoon. Just scrolled to her contact, stared at it for about 5 seconds, and hit delete. No ceremony, no dramatic screenshot to send to Troy, just gone. Then I went through and blocked her on every social media platform. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, even Twitter, though neither of us really used it. If she wanted to keep posting cryptic quotes about wells running dry, she could do it without me as an audience. The Spotify Premium account was next. That one actually made me laugh out loud. We'd been sharing my account for 2 years, and I'd never thought twice about it. But now? Now she could listen to her heartbreak playlist with ads interrupting every 3 songs. Capitalism's version of karma, and honestly, pretty satisfying. Leah checked on me sometimes, usually with texts like, "You doing okay?" or "Need anything?" which I appreciated more than I could express. Troy celebrated by sending me memes, his love language, apparently. My favorite was the one that said, "System error, cheater not found," with a loading bar stuck at 0%. I laughed for the first time in weeks, a genuine, stomach-hurting laugh that felt like medicine. Humor, I realized, is therapy with better timing and significantly lower copays. Every joke, every sarcastic comment, every moment of finding absurdity in the disaster, it all helped. Not in that toxic, laugh away your pain way, but in the acknowledge how ridiculous this situation is and refuse to let it break you way. I was healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. 3 weeks after achieving complete radio silence from Clarissa, I met Maya. Not because I was looking, honestly, dating was the last thing on my mind, but because Troy had forcibly reactivated my Hinge profile while I was in the bathroom at his place. "You need to get back out there," he'd said when I'd discovered his meddling. Not to find someone, just to remember that normal women exist. Maya was a 3rd-grade teacher with a golden retriever named Noodles, which was objectively the best dog name I'd ever heard. Her first message to me was, "If you like dogs, sarcasm, and bad puns, I'm your girl. If you don't, I'm also your girl, but we'll have to work on your personality." Challenge absolutely accepted. Our first date lasted 4 hours. We met for coffee, ironically at Daily Grind. because apparently that place was determined to feature in every major chapter of my romantic life, and ended up walking through Prospect Park with Noodles, talking about everything and nothing. No designer dresses, no talk about stock portfolios or business synergy, just real conversation with someone who laughed at my jokes and didn't make me feel like I needed to apologize for existing. When she asked, "So when do I get to meet your friends?" I didn't panic or make excuses. I just grinned and said, "Whenever you want. They're pretty great, actually. One of them is responsible for us matching, so you kind of owe him." She laughed, that genuine kind that makes her eyes crinkle. Good answer. Most guys either want to keep you secret or introduce you to their mom on the second date. You seem refreshingly normal. I've been told I'm grounded, I said, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an insult. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was walking on air, with a woman who thought I was enough exactly as I was. About 2 months after Maya and I started dating, Leah sent me a screenshot. Clarissa had posted another cryptic quote on Instagram. "You never know the value of water till the well runs dry." She'd apparently recycled it, because growth and self-awareness weren't really her strong suits. I showed it to Maya, who was sitting on my new couch, the comfortable one, with Noodles sprawled across her lap like a 60-pound blanket. She read it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Is she talking about you? Because that's adorable. Honey, you were the whole water supply, the well, and the guy who maintained the infrastructure." She didn't lose water. She lost a fully operational utility company. I laughed so hard I snorted, which made Noodles bark in confusion. This was my life now, laughing at my ex-wife's Instagram posts with my girlfriend and her golden retriever, feeling nothing but mild amusement where there used to be pain. "You know what's funny?" I said, scratching Noodles behind the ears. "I don't hate her anymore. I actually think I should thank her. Without her arrogance and that spectacular dinner disaster, I'd never have discovered my spine, or my sense of humor, or you." Maya smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still made my stomach flip in the best way. "Well, I'm definitely grateful to her terrible life choices. Though I'm more grateful to Troy for reactivating your Hinge profile. We should probably buy him a thank you gift," I said. "Already did. Send him a case of craft beer with a note that says, 'Thanks for being a meddling genius.'" That's when I knew I'd found something real. Someone who understood that friendship mattered, that loyalty was currency, that the small gestures meant more than grand declarations. Troy had sent back a photo of himself holding a beer with the caption, "Best Wingman Award goes to me." "You're welcome. When's the wedding?" I call best man. We weren't anywhere near that yet, but for the first time, the idea didn't terrify me. Marriage didn't have to be what I'd experienced with Clarissa, walking on eggshells, shrinking yourself, constantly auditioning for approval. It could be what I had with Maya. Easy laughter, genuine conversation, someone who thought my Target shopping habits were endearing rather than embarrassing. Now I knew the real meaning of wealth. It wasn't fancy dinners or synergy or impressing people who'd forget your name the next day. It was peace. It was loyalty. It was people who laughed with you, not at you. It was waking up and not dreading the day ahead. It was being yourself without apology. So when people asked, and they did, usually with that nosy curiosity that people have about messy divorces, "Would you ever take Clarissa back?" I just smiled and said, "Don't worry, she won't have to," because I'd found something better than the life I'd lost. I'd found myself again, and that was worth more than all the statement pieces and yacht parties in the world. Clarissa could keep her cryptic quotes and her well metaphors. I had peace, and that made me the richest man in Brooklyn.